Darkness prevails. Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep headfirst into those places where the shadows cling a little too tightly and the silence is always somehow listening. Imagine, if you will, you're tucked in, the world outside is hushed, but inside, the very bones of your house seem to sigh, to whisper secrets you're not meant to hear. You feel that telltale shiver, that sudden, inexplicable awareness that you might not be entirely alone. Tonight, we explore those true, disturbing, haunted house scary stories that make you question every creak and groan. Of course, survival is relative. You'll probably survive the video, but your ability to sleep with the lights off? That's a different story. You probably won't survive this with your blissful ignorance intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our little community of night owls. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're settled in now, aren't you? The darkness outside your window is a thick, velvety curtain, and the only light comes from this screen, or maybe a sliver from the hallway if you're feeling particularly brave tonight. The house around you has fallen into its nightly rhythm of quiet, or what passes for quiet, because it's in these moments when the distractions of the day have faded that you start to hear them, the little noises, the ticks, the creaks, the subtle groans. You feel that familiar prickle on the back of your neck, a sensation as old as humankind, the one that whispers, "Are you sure you're alone?" At first, you dismiss it. It's just the house settling, you tell yourself. And you're not wrong, not entirely. Many older homes, particularly those built before the advent of modern central heating and sophisticated humidity control, experience significant wood expansion and contraction. It's a perfectly natural phenomenon, timbers swelling and shrinking with the daily and seasonal shifts in temperature and moisture. The house is, in a very real sense, alive, breathing with the environment. Its wooden skeleton shifts, its joints moan. It's not settling, it's just doing house yoga, stretching its ancient joists. But then a different sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Not quite the pipes, not quite the wind. It's a little too deliberate. This is where your mind starts to play its little games. Your breath catches for just a second. You strain your ears, listening past the hum of the refrigerator or the distant rumble of traffic. There it is again. Tap, tap, tap. Is it coming from inside the walls? Or perhaps from the room next door, the one you know is empty? It's moments like these that bring to mind the rather unsettling lore of the Death Watch beetle. These tiny insects, Zestobium rufovolosum if you want to get formal, have a peculiar courtship ritual. They tap their heads against wooden surfaces, often the beams within old houses, to attract mates. In the profound stillness of a sick room, especially in centuries past, this rhythmic tapping was often one of the few distinct sounds an ailing person or their caregiver might hear. So naturally, it became an omen, a tiny, chitinous harbinger ticking down the final moments. Cheery thought, isn't it? Just a little beetle looking for love, accidentally predicting your demise. But the sounds aren't always so easily, if morbidly, attributed. What about the whisper that seems to sigh just past your ear when there's no draft? Or the floorboard that creaks upstairs when everyone is accounted for, tucked safely in their beds downstairs? Or are they? You find yourself holding your breath, straining to identify the source, to rationalize it away. It's the plumbing, the heating, the wind. It's the neighbor's cat again. Cats are basically tiny, furry agents of chaos, so it's a 50-50 they're somehow involved in most unexplained household phenomena. Yet, the explanations feel thin, like a worn blanket on a cold night. Folklorists and psychologists still argue whether the universal fear of things that go bump in the night is an evolutionary survival instinct, honed by millennia of needing to be alert to nocturnal predators, or a culturally conditioned response shaped by generations of scary stories told around flickering fires and later flickering screens. Perhaps it's a bit of both. That prickle, that unease, it feels deeply embedded in our DNA, a primal alarm system. But the stories give that feeling a name, a face, a chilling narrative. Tonight, we're not going to spend too much time trying to debunk these sounds, trying to find a logical explanation for every unsettling murmur the night offers. No, tonight we lean into that prickle. We acknowledge that soft shuffle you just heard in the hallway. We consider the possibility that the faint scent of perfume, unfamiliar and out of place, isn't just your imagination. What if the house is trying to tell you something? What if those sighs and whispers are not from the wooden pipes, but from something else? Something that shares your space, unseen, unheard by day, but stirring in the deep quiet of the night. Like someone dragging a very old, very reluctant grandfather clock across the attic. You don't even have an attic, or a grandfather clock for that matter. Awkward, this very ambiguity that forms the foundation of so many haunted house stories. The mundane transformed into the menacing. The everyday sounds of a home, twisted by darkness and solitude into something that hints at a presence, a history, a story that wants to be heard, or perhaps a warning that needs to be heeded. You pull the covers a little tighter, don't you? The fan's hum suddenly seems a little less comforting, a little more like a breathy sigh accompanying the house's own nocturnal monologue. The familiar becomes foreign, and the stage is set for a different kind of listening, a deeper attention to the subtle symphony of a place that might just be more crowded than you think. You find yourself in this slightly unsettled state, attuned to the symphony of your own home's creaks and groans, and it's natural to wonder where this deep-seated feeling comes from, this instinctive notion that a place, a structure, can hold on to something more than just memories. We unearth early beliefs about why spirits might linger in homes, and it's a tradition that stretches back further than written history. The idea that a dwelling can become tethered to an unseen presence is not a newfangled notion cooked up by Victorian spiritualists or modern horror writers. It's practically woven into the fabric of human consciousness. Imagine for a moment you're not in your comfortable, centrally heated home, but in a rudimentary shelter thousands of years ago. The fire in the center of your hut is more than just warmth. It's a beacon against the vast, often terrifying darkness outside. Protection from predators, from the elements, yes, but also from other things. Early animistic beliefs, prevalent in many ancient cultures, held that spirits inhabited everything. Rocks, trees, rivers, and certainly the places humans built to protect themselves. If a spirit resided in a mighty oak tree, why wouldn't it take an interest in the dwelling you fashioned from its wood? It's less like your house is haunted, more like you've moved into the spirit's timeshare without asking. The ancient Egyptians, for instance, had a complex understanding of the soul, believing it comprised several parts. One of these, the Ka, was a life force or spiritual double that continued to exist after death and required sustenance, food, drink, and a place to reside. While tombs were specifically constructed for this purpose, the concept extended to the idea that spirits could remain connected to places significant in their lives, or to their descendants. Offerings were made to appease these spirits, to ensure they remained benevolent and didn't cause trouble for the living. It's not so different from leaving out milk and cookies, just with slightly more existential dread involved. The mainstream historical fact is that the elaborate Egyptian funerary practices, including mummification and the construction of pyramids, were all designed to ensure the deceased's successful journey and comfortable existence in the afterlife, which included providing for their Ka. Then you have the Roman concept of Lares and Penates. The Lares were guardian deities of the household, often believed to be spirits of ancestors, while the Penates were protectors of the storeroom and, by extension, the family's sustenance and well-being. Small shrines, known as Laruria, were common in Roman homes, where daily offerings and prayers would be made. If these spirits were neglected, it was believed misfortune could befall the household. Imagine forgetting to say good morning to the kitchen cupboard gods, and your bread inexplicably molds overnight. Coincidence? The Romans would probably think not. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of ancestor worship in many ancient cultures directly led to the specific belief in haunted houses as we understand them, or if it was a more general animistic worldview that simply included dwellings as potential spirit homes. It's likely a complex interplay. If your great-great-grandfather's spirit is believed to watch over the family home, it's a short step to believing that a less benevolent spirit, perhaps one with unfinished business or a traumatic end, could also become attached to a place. Consider, too, the act of building itself. In many cultures, foundation sacrifices were once a grim reality. This wasn't just putting a lucky coin under the cornerstone. The quirky or fringe tidbit here is the unsettling historical practice, though rare and often debated in its extent, a bop for literally building sacrifice. The belief was that to ensure the stability and longevity of a significant structure, like a bridge or a castle, a living being needed to be interred within its foundations. The spirit of the sacrificed would then become the guardian of the structure. While often animals were used, darker legends whispered of human sacrifices, their unwilling spirits forever bound to the stones and mortar. So, that creak in the floorboards? Maybe it's not the house settling. Maybe it's just a very, very old and very disgruntled guardian. Even the very materials used in construction could be seen as imbued with certain properties of previous occupants. If a house was built with timbers from a sacred grove or stones from an ancient burial site, it was thought these materials could carry their spiritual attachments with them. You're not just getting reclaimed wood, you're getting a pre-owned spiritual tenant, possibly with a penchant for rearranging the cutlery when you're not looking. Think about the concept of genius loci, the spirit of a place. This ancient Roman idea suggested that every location had its own unique protective spirit. It wasn't necessarily about a human ghost, but rather the essence, the atmosphere, the very character of the location itself having a kind of consciousness. A dark, oppressive forest would have a different genius loci than a sunny, open meadow. A house, particularly one that has stood for generations, witnessing births, deaths, joys, and sorrows, could develop a potent genius loci, an atmosphere so thick with accumulated human experience that it feels like a presence in itself. And what happens when that presence is disturbed, or when the life of the house is violently altered? Sudden death, murder, profound tragedy, these were, and still are, widely believed to be potent catalysts for creating a lingering spiritual imprint. The emotional residue, the shock, the unfinished business, it's all thought to cling to the walls, the floors, the very air of the place where the event occurred. The spirit, unable to move on, replays its trauma, or seeks to communicate its distress, or perhaps even its anger. So as you sit there, perhaps noticing the way the shadows play in the corner of your eye, remember that these feelings, these ancient notions of spirits in the home, are not just the product of an overactive imagination. They are echoes of a time when the veil between worlds was considered much thinner, when the unseen was an accepted part of daily life, and when a home was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a shared space, sometimes with those who had come before and hadn't quite managed to leave. You're not just listening to the house settle. You're participating in an age-old human tradition of wondering. What or who settles with it? That sense of a place holding on to an echo or residue of past events is something you feel almost viscerally when you consider certain locations. The air itself seems heavy charged. And perhaps no house in modern American history embodies this more chillingly than the one at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. You enter the infamous house where terrifying demonic claims captivated the world, and even now, decades later, the name Amityville is practically synonymous with a particular brand of domestic horror, a potent cocktail of brutal crime and alleged supernatural retribution. The story begins not with ghostly apparitions, but with a very real, very human tragedy. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. systematically shot and killed 6 members of his family as they slept in their beds in that large Dutch colonial house. The sheer horror of the event shocked the quiet suburban community. DeFeo Jr. initially claimed he'd found his family murdered, but his story quickly unraveled, and he was arrested and subsequently convicted. The house, scene of such unimaginable violence, sat empty for a time, a silent monument to the slaughter that had occurred within its walls. You can almost picture it, can't you? The drawn curtains, the overgrown lawn, the collective shudder of the neighborhood as they passed by. Just over a year later, in December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with Kathy's 3 children from a previous marriage, moved in. They bought the house for a remarkably low price, aware of its gruesome history, but hoping to make it their dream home. Their dream, however, allegedly turned into a 28-day nightmare. From the moment they moved in, according to their later accounts, strange and terrifying things began to happen. You're with them, stepping over the threshold, perhaps feeling a slight, inexplicable chill despite the sunny December day. George reported waking up at 3:15 a.m. every morning, the approximate time of the DeFeo murders, feeling inexplicably cold and agitated. Swarms of flies appeared in certain rooms, even in the dead of winter, a detail that always struck a particularly unsettling chord. Think about that for a moment. The persistent buzzing presence of insects associated with decay, appearing out of season in a specific room. It's a classic trope of demonic infestation in folklore, a sign of corruption. The mainstream historical fact here is that the DeFeo murders were indeed a horrific, real event that set the stage for the subsequent haunting claims. The house was undeniably a place of profound tragedy before the Lutzes even arrived. Kathy Lutz reported levitating in her sleep and of feeling an unseen presence in the house. The children, too, were affected. Missy, the youngest daughter, began talking about an imaginary friend named Jody, described as a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. Jody, she said, lived in the house and could change shape. Imagine your child calmly telling you about their new, slightly demonic-looking friend. You probably start sleeping with one eye open and a very large can of note spray. Odors, both foul and sickly sweet, would allegedly manifest and then vanish. Cold spots drifted through the house. Doors would open and slam shut on their own. Green slime was said to ooze from the walls and keels. George claimed to see Kathy's face momentarily transform into that of an old woman. A priest who came to bless the house was reportedly slapped by an unseen hand and told to get out by a disembodied voice, later suffering from stigmata-like blisters on his hands. These are the details that cemented the Amityville story in the public consciousness, vivid, visceral, and deeply unsettling. It wasn't just bumps in the night. It was a full-frontal spiritual assault. The family's ordeal culminated, they said, in a terrifying final night where the phenomena escalated wildly, forcing them to flee the house with only the clothes on their backs, leaving all their possessions behind. They never returned. Their story became the basis for Jay Anson's 1977 best-selling book, The Amityville Horror, and a subsequent blockbuster film in 1979, catapulting the house and its alleged haunting into international notoriety. Suddenly, everyone knew about the house with the distinctive quarter-round windows that looked like malevolent eyes. Those windows became an icon of cinematic horror, instantly recognizable. Of course, the Amityville saga is not without its intense controversy. Skeptics and debunkers, including researchers and later occupants of the house, have pointed to numerous inconsistencies in the Lutz's story. There are claims that the narrative was largely fabricated, a hoax concocted for financial gain. William Weber, Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s defense attorney, even stated that he, George, and Kathy Lutz created this horror story over many bottles of wine. Historians still argue whether the Amityville haunting was a genuine paranormal event, a psychological manifestation of stress and suggestion fueled by the house's dark history, or an elaborate, commercially successful hoax. The truth is likely buried somewhere under layers of sensationalism, personal testimony, and conflicting evidence. One quirky or fringe tidbit connected to the Amityville story is the alleged discovery of a hidden red room in the basement by the Lutzes. This small, strangely painted room was not on the house plans and was said to be the source of much of the negative energy. Some paranormal theories suggest such hidden or consecrated spaces can act as focal points or gateways for spiritual activity. Or it was just a weirdly painted storage closet, depending on who you ask. It's like finding a secret room in your house filled with nothing but marionettes. You don't ask questions, you just slowly close the door and pretend it never happened. Regardless of the ongoing debate about its truth, the Amityville story tapped into a primal fear, the idea that your home, your sanctuary, could turn against you, becoming a source of terror rather than comfort. It highlights the power of suggestion, the impact of a place's history on its perceived atmosphere, and our enduring fascination with the possibility that malevolent forces can invade our most personal spaces. You can almost feel the oppressive atmosphere the Lutzes described, the creeping dread that turns every shadow into a threat, every unexplained sound into a whisper from the abyss. The image of those eyes staring out from the house, a silent, brooding presence on Ocean Avenue, continues to haunt the landscape of popular culture, a chilling reminder that some houses seem destined to hold their horrors close. From the relatively modern terror of Amityville, you drift across the Atlantic back in time to a place steeped in centuries of English folklore and spectral whispers. We investigate England's most haunted rectory and its spectral cast, Borley Rectory. Nestled in the quiet countryside of Essex, this Victorian Gothic pile, before its eventual destruction by fire, earned a reputation so formidable that it attracted psychical researchers, skeptics, and sensation seekers for decades. You're approaching it now, perhaps on a misty evening, the silhouette of the rectory looming against a gray sky, its dark windows like vacant eyes staring out over the desolate landscape. The stories surrounding Borley Rectory are a tapestry woven from local legends, alleged historical events, and the detailed investigations of paranormal enthusiasts, most notably Harry Price, a controversial but undeniably influential figure in early 20th century psychical research. The original rectory was built in 1862 by the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, near the site of an older monastic building. It's this supposed monastic connection that forms the backbone of Borley's most famous ghost story, the Phantom Nun. Legend has it that in the 13th century, a Benedictine monastery stood near the site. A monk from this monastery supposedly eloped with a nun from a nearby convent. Their forbidden love, however, was discovered. The monk was said to have been executed, and the nun, according to the most enduring version of the tale, was walled up alive within the convent walls, or in some tellings, within a cellar of the monastic buildings that predated the rectory. Her mournful, spectral figure was then seen drifting through the rectory gardens, perpetually searching, perhaps, for her lost lover or lamenting her cruel fate. You can almost see her, a pale, sorrowful shape gliding between the overgrown rose bushes, the rustle of her habit indistinguishable from the sigh of the wind. It's the quintessential tragic ghostly romance, a staple of English folklore, and one that Price's investigations would amplify. The Reverend Bull and his family reported a variety of unexplained phenomena during their tenure, from phantom footsteps and whispers to the appearance of a ghostly coach driven by headless horsemen, a rather flamboyant touch, even for a haunted house. Subsequent rectors and their families also reported unsettling experiences. Bells would ring without being touched. Objects would be thrown by unseen hands, and strange lights would appear. The sheer variety of phenomena is noteworthy. Borley wasn't a one-trick pony in the haunting department. It offered a full spectral buffet, from auditory disturbances to visual apparitions and poltergeist activity. It's like the ghosts were competing for who could be the most dramatically spooky. Oh, you just rattled some chains? Watch me manifest a spectral stagecoach, darling. Harry Price first became involved with Borley in 1929, invited by the then rector, Reverend Guy Eric Smith, whose wife had reportedly found a human skull while cleaning out a cupboard. Price, with his flair for publicity and his array of ghost hunting gadgets, some of which were quite innovative for the time, brought Borley Rectory to national and international attention. He conducted numerous seances and investigations, documenting phenomena such as spirit riding, appearing on walls, stone throwing, and temperature drops. The mainstream historical fact is that Harry Price's investigations and his subsequent books, The Most Haunted House in England, 1940, and The End of Borley Rectory, 1946, cemented Borley's reputation, even as his methods and conclusions faced scrutiny from fellow researchers. Price's most famous period of investigation occurred when he rented the rectory from 1937 to 1938, assembling a team of observers to systematically record any occurrences. It was during this time that the phenomena seemed to intensify, or at least the documentation of it did. The story of the nun was further embellished with details gleaned from alleged spirit communications, including a name, Marie Lair, and a specific plea for burial. Historians still argue whether Harry Price genuinely documented paranormal events at Borley, embellished existing folklore for publicity, or was even, in some instances, the victim of hoaxes perpetrated by others, or perhaps even a perpetrator himself. His credibility remains a hotly debated topic in the annals of psychical research. One of the quirky or fringe tidbits surrounding Borley is the sheer number and variety of distinct ghostly figures reported over the years. Beyond the famous nun and the headless coachman, there were sightings of Henry Bull himself, a girl in white, an unidentified man in gray, and even reports of phantom animals. It was as if the rectory was a spectral Grand Central Station. Some theories suggest that certain locations, due to geological factors or intense emotional imprints, can act as recorders of past events, replaying them for sensitive individuals. Or maybe it was just a very popular afterlife hangout spot. Good atmosphere, plenty of chains to rattle, 5 stars. The rectory itself was a gloomy, rambling Victorian structure, somewhat isolated, making it the perfect setting for such tales. Its architecture almost seemed designed to encourage shadows and strange echoes. The very layout of such old houses, with their long corridors, numerous rooms, and creaking floorboards, can play tricks on a mind, especially when primed by stories of ghostly inhabitants. You can imagine walking those halls at night, every gust of wind through a loose window frame sounding like a sigh, every shadow in a corner appearing to coalesce into a human form. Borley Rectory burned down in 1939, an event some claimed was foretold by the spirits. Even after its destruction, claims of paranormal activity on the site persisted. The ruins continued to attract curiosity seekers, and ghostly figures were still reported among the charred remains. The legacy of Borley is complex. It's a story of folklore, alleged paranormal phenomena, dedicated, if controversial, investigation, and the power of a good ghost story to capture the public imagination. You can almost smell the lingering scent of wood smoke and something else, something indefinable, hanging over the site where the rectory once stood, a testament to its enduring, chilling fame. The nun may no longer have walls to glide past, but her story, and Borley's, continues to drift through the annals of the haunted, leaving the misty fields of Essex. Your journey takes you across the Atlantic once more, this time to the sun-drenched landscapes of California, but to a house that embodies a peculiar kind of darkness, born not necessarily of overt malevolence, but of profound grief, superstition, and perhaps a touch of madness. You navigate Sarah Winchester's bizarre mansion, built to appease troubled souls, a sprawling, bewildering architectural anomaly in San Jose. The Winchester Mystery House, as it's famously known, isn't just a house. It's a monument to one woman's obsession, a physical manifestation of her attempts to outwit or placate the spirits she believed haunted her. Sarah Winchester was the widow of William Wirt Winchester, treasurer of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Upon his death from tuberculosis in 1881, she inherited a vast fortune, equivalent to hundreds of millions of dollars in today's currency. She also inherited, according to popular legend, a terrible curse. The story goes that, devastated by the loss of her infant daughter years earlier, and now her husband, Sarah consulted a Boston medium. This spiritualist advisor, so the tale claims, told her that her family and fortune were haunted by the spirits of all those killed by Winchester rifles, a staggering number of souls, from Native Americans to Civil War soldiers. The medium's alleged prescription was as strange as the diagnosis. Sarah was to move west and build a great house for herself and these spirits. Construction, the medium supposedly warned, must never cease. If it did, Sarah would die. It's quite the home improvement project, Mandy. Honey, the psychic says we need to add a new wing or I'm toast. Pass the hammer. And so, in 1886, Sarah Winchester purchased an 8-room farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley and began to build, and build, and build. For the next 38 years, until her death in 1922, construction continued ceaselessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The result is a sprawling, labyrinthine mansion covering several acres with an estimated 160 rooms. The exact number is debated, as the house is so confusing. 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, though she rarely entertained, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 window panes, 17 chimneys, 2 basements, and 3 elevators. You're wandering its halls now, and it's easy to get disoriented. Staircases ascend to blank ceilings. Doors open onto solid walls or perilous drops to the courtyard below. One cabinet opens to reveal a shallow space. Another opens into a warren of 30 other rooms. It's like an M.C. Escher drawing brought to life by a very wealthy, very eccentric, and possibly very frightened woman. The house is filled with architectural oddities reportedly designed to confuse the vengeful spirits. The number 13 is a recurring motif. 13 bathrooms, windows with 13 panes, staircases with 13 steps, 13 ceiling panels in certain rooms. There's even a 13th bathroom with 13 windows, a detail that seems less about confusing spirits and more about ensuring you really appreciate the number 13 while indisposed. The mainstream historical fact is that Sarah Winchester did indeed engage in continuous, often haphazard construction on her San Jose mansion for decades, resulting in its unique and bewildering design. The reasons for this obsessive building, however, are where fact blurs into legend. Many of the mansion's features seem to have no practical purpose. There are skylights and floors, secret passages, and a general sense of bewildering complexity. She reportedly held seances nightly in a special room, the Blue Room, to communicate with the spirits and receive her building instructions for the following day. Imagine being the foreman, getting your daily brief from spirits channeled through your grieving employer. All right, boys, the ghosts want a chimney in the linen closet and a staircase that goes nowhere. Don't ask, just build. Historians still argue whether Sarah Winchester was truly haunted and building to appease spirits, or if she was an intelligent but deeply eccentric woman coping with immense grief and social isolation, using her fortune to fund a massive, continuous hobby that provided employment for many. Some suggest she was a brilliant, if unconventional, architect experimenting with design, or perhaps even an early adopter of seismic-resistant construction techniques, given the 1906 San Francisco earthquake significantly damaged parts of the house. The truth of her motivations likely lies somewhere in a complex mix of these possibilities. One quirky or fringe tidbit about the Winchester Mystery House is Sarah's alleged obsession with spiderwebs. She incorporated a spiderweb motif into some of the stained glass windows, most famously one she designed herself. Some interpret this as another symbol of her attempt to trap spirits Or perhaps it was simply a Victorian fascination with nature's patterns. Or maybe she just really, really hated flies. The sheer scale of the operation is mind-boggling. Carpenters, craftsmen, and laborers worked around the clock, with Sarah herself often sketching designs on napkins or tablecloths, which were then translated into architectural reality, however strange. There was no master plan. The house grew organically, room by room, wing by wing, a sprawling wooden testament to an unceasing directive. You can almost hear the constant cacophony of hammers and saws, a sound that only fell silent upon her death. Today, the Winchester Mystery House is a popular tourist attraction, and many visitors and staff members report experiencing unexplained phenomena. Cold spots, disembodied footsteps, doors slamming, ghostly apparitions, the classic hallmarks of a haunted location are all said to be present. Some claim to see Sarah herself, a small black-clad figure, or the spirits of workmen. Is it the lingering energy of the countless spirits Sarah believed she was housing? Or is it the powerful atmosphere of the house itself, its strange angles and dead ends designed to disorient and unsettle, working its psychological magic on suggestible minds? You try to imagine Sarah Winchester, a tiny woman, often dressed in mourning, wandering these bewildering corridors alone at night, perhaps hoping to evade the spirits she was simultaneously trying to shelter. Did she find peace in the constant construction? Or was it a self-imposed prison, a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil? The house remains a profound enigma, a monument to a grief so vast it reshaped the physical world around it. It stands as a strange, sprawling question mark, a testament to wealth, loss, and the extraordinary lengths one might go to in search of solace or escape from the ghosts of past, whether real or imagined. From the bewildering maze built from grief and superstition, your spectral travels now take you south to the sultry, atmospheric streets of New Orleans, a city renowned for its vibrant culture, its music, its cuisine, and its particularly dark, lingering ghosts. Here, in the heart of the French Quarter, we confront the grim legacy within Madame Lalaury's New Orleans residence. The elegant facade of the Royal Street Mansion belies a history so horrific that it has become one of America's most infamous haunted locations, a place where the echoes of unimaginable cruelty still seem to resonate. You're standing before it now, the wrought iron balconies casting long, spidery shadows in the humid air, a sense of profound unease settling upon you despite the bustling city life around. Delphine Lalaury was a prominent New Orleans socialite in the early 19th century, known for her wealth, her beauty, and her lavish parties. Born Marie Delphine McCarty in 1787 into a wealthy Creole family, she married 3 times, her final husband being Dr. Louis Lalaury. They moved into the mansion at 1140 Royal Street in 1832. To outward appearances, Madame Lalaury was a respected member of high society. But behind the opulent exterior, a very different reality was unfolding. Rumors had long circulated among the enslaved community and whispered among some white residents about her cruel treatment of the people she enslaved. These whispers, however, were largely dismissed or ignored by those in her social circle. It's a chilling reminder of how easily brutality can be hidden behind a veneer of respectability and social standing. The truth of what was happening within the Lalaury mansion began to unravel horrifically on April 10, 1834. A fire broke out in the kitchen of the house. When neighbors and firefighters rushed to the scene, they discovered the source of the blaze was the enslaved cook, a woman reportedly in her 70s who confessed to starting the fire as a suicide attempt. She claimed she would rather die than be taken to the uppermost room, where, she said, those who were sent there never returned. Her desperate act, born of unimaginable suffering, would expose the horrors within. You can almost feel the heat of the flames, smell the acrid smoke, and sense the rising panic and dawning realization among the rescuers. Urged on by the cook's terrible testimony and the refusal of the Lalaury's to provide keys to the slave quarters, the rescuers broke down the doors. What they found in the attic and other hidden parts of the mansion, according to contemporary newspaper accounts and eyewitness testimonies, was a scene of unspeakable torture and depravity. Several enslaved individuals were found chained, starved, and horribly mutilated. Descriptions from the period are harrowing, detailing victims with broken limbs, gouged eyes, and flesh flayed by whips. Some were found in spiked collars, others confined in tiny, cramped cages. The mainstream historical fact is that contemporary newspaper reports from 1834, such as those in the New Orleans Bee and the Courier, documented the horrific discoveries made in the LaLaurie mansion following the fire, describing scenes of torture and abuse that shocked the city. When news of these atrocities spread through New Orleans, public outrage was swift and violent. A mob descended upon the Royal Street mansion, destroying furniture and looting whatever they could. Madame LaLaurie, however, managed to escape, reportedly fleeing to Covington, Louisiana, and then to Paris, France, where she died in 1849. She never faced legal justice for her crimes. Her escape only added to the legend, leaving a sense of unfinished business, of horrors unatoned for. It's a common theme in powerful hauntings, the lack of closure, the sense that profound injustice allows a negative energy to fester. The house itself, after being ransacked, stood empty and derelict for many years, its reputation forever stained. Subsequent owners and tenants reported a catalog of terrifying phenomena. Screams of agony, moans, and cries for help are said to emanate from the empty rooms, particularly from the former slave quarters and the attic. Apparitions of tormented figures, spectral victims of LaLaurie's cruelty, have reportedly been seen. The feeling of being watched, of an oppressive, malevolent presence, is a common experience for those who venture near or within its walls. You can imagine the psychic imprint left by such extreme suffering. The very bricks and mortar seem to have absorbed the terror and pain. One particularly chilling recurring apparition is said to be that of a young enslaved girl named Leah, who, according to local lore, threw herself from the roof of the mansion to escape a whipping from Madame LaLaurie after accidentally snagging her hair while combing it. While this specific story is part of the legend and not definitively confirmed by historical records from the fire, it has become a potent part of the LaLaurie ghost narrative. Historians still argue whether all the specific lurid details attributed to the LaLaurie hauntings are verifiable fact or have been embellished over time through folklore and sensationalism. However, the core historical truth of the horrific abuse is undeniable. Not a quirky or fringe tidbit associated with the LaLaurie mansion is that in the late 19th century, the house was, for a time, used as a school, a furniture store, and even an apartment building. Imagine trying to learn your ABCs or pick out a new sofa while the tormented spirits of the past are allegedly wailing in the next room. Yes, this couch is lovely, but do you have anything in a less actively haunted fabric? Tenant turnover was, unsurprisingly, rather high. The sheer brutality of Madame LaLaurie's crimes sets this haunting apart. It's not a tale of a wistful, misunderstood spirit, or the echoes of profound human evil. The house is seen by many as a place saturated with negative energy, a wound in the city's spiritual landscape. Even today, passers-by report feeling sudden waves of nausea, dread, or inexplicable sadness when near the building. The stories are so potent that they continue to inspire fear and fascination, finding their way into books, television shows, and the chilling repertoire of New Orleans ghost tour guides. You stand there, looking up at the ornate balconies, now beautifully restored, and it's hard to reconcile the elegance of the architecture with the depravity it once concealed. But the stories persist, a testament to the victims and a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a polished surface. The LaLaurie mansion remains a grim monument, its very name a shiver down the spine, a place where the air feels thick with the unspeakable, and the whispers of the past are said to be all too real. Leaving the oppressive atmosphere of the LaLaurie mansion, your journey into the shadowy corners of haunted history takes you inland to the rural landscapes of 19th century Tennessee. Here, you encounter a haunting that is unique in its nature, not for a grand, imposing house, but for the sheer viciousness and vocal interactivity of its unseen tormentor, the Bell Witch. You encounter the unseen entity that tormented a rural Tennessee family, a case so famous it has spawned countless books, articles, and even a few rather unsettling films. There's no decaying Gothic pile here, just a seemingly ordinary frontier farmstead that became the epicenter of a terrifying and deeply personal spiritual assault. The story begins around 1817 in Adams, Robertson County, Tennessee, on the farm of John Bell Sr. He was a prosperous farmer, a respected member of the community, living with his wife Lucy and their several children. The initial disturbances were subtle, almost mundane, knocking sounds on the doors and outer walls of their log cabin. Sounds of gnawing on the bedposts, like a rat, but no rat could ever be found. You can imagine the family, initially annoyed, perhaps blaming animals or the settling of the cabin. Just another Tuesday on the frontier, probably a giant invisible beaver with a grudge. But the activity soon escalated, becoming more overt and more personal. The entity, which would later become known as the Bell Witch, though it often referred to itself as Kate, supposedly after a troublesome local woman John Bell had dealings with, though this Kate Batts was alive and well, and not a witch by most accounts, began to physically interact with the family. They reported being slapped, pinched, and having their hair pulled by an unseen force. Bed covers will be yanked off them in the night. You're there in that small, firelit cabin, the wind howling outside, and suddenly your blankets are ripped away and an icy hand seems to clutch at your throat. The comfort of your bed becomes a place of vulnerability. What truly set the Bell Witch haunting apart was its voice. Initially, it was described as faint whispers, like an old woman humming or singing. But over time, Kate developed a strong, clear voice, often described as harsh and metallic. And she loved to talk. She would engage in conversations, curse, taunt, and even gossip with the family and their visitors. She seemed to know intimate details about people, things she couldn't possibly have learned through normal means. Imagine an invisible, malevolent gossip columnist living in your walls, one with a penchant for physical assault and really bad singing. The entity focused much of its malevolence on John Bell Sr. and his youngest daughter, Betsy. Betsy, a young teenager at the time, suffered greatly. She was slapped, pinched, stuck with pins, and would often faint or have seizures during the entity's attacks. John Bell Sr. endured relentless torment, both physical and verbal. Kate would loudly proclaim her hatred for old Jack Bell, as she called him, and vowed to kill him. He suffered from recurring episodes of facial seizures and difficulty swallowing, symptoms that worsened over time, which Kate gleefully claimed to be causing. The mainstream historical fact is that numerous contemporary accounts and later historical recollections, including those from people outside the Bell family, documented the strange phenomena attributed to the Bell Witch, making it one of the best attested poltergeist cases in American history. Andrew Jackson himself is even rumored to have encountered the entity, though this is likely an apocryphal addition to the legend. The fame of the Bell Witch spread throughout the region, and people came from far and wide to witness the phenomena. Kate seemed to relish an audience, often putting on quite a show, conversing with visitors, answering questions, and sometimes even demonstrating her powers by moving objects or mimicking voices. She was, by all accounts, a performer, albeit a terrifying and malicious one. One quirky or fringe tidbit is that Kate sometimes showed a bizarre, almost helpful side, though often tinged with her usual unpleasantness. She would reportedly discuss sermons with Lucy Bell, recite scripture, sometimes accurately, sometimes with her own blasphemous alterations, and even once helped locate a misplaced item, all while continuing to torment John and Betsy. It's like having a demon that occasionally tidies up before getting back to the serious business of making your life a misery. Found your keys. Now, about that eternal damnation, historians still argue whether the Bell, which was a genuine supernatural entity, a complex case of poltergeist activity centered on Betsy Bell, as is common in such cases involving adolescent girls, a manifestation of psychological stress within the family, or even a clever, long-running hoax perpetrated by someone with a talent for ventriloquism and a deep-seated grudge. The sheer duration and intensity of the reported phenomena and the number of external witnesses make it a particularly puzzling case. The torment of John Bell Sr. continued for several years, his health steadily declining. In December 1820, he fell into a coma and died. After his death, a small, unidentified vial of liquid was reportedly found in the medicine cupboard. Kate triumphantly claimed she had given him a dose from the vial, poisoning him. When a drop of the liquid was tested on the family cat, the cat supposedly died instantly. This sealed the narrative for many, the Bell which had fulfilled her promise to kill John Bell. Following his death, and after disrupting Betsy Bell's engagement to a local young man named Joshua Gardner, whom Kate vehemently disapproved of, the entity's activity gradually lessened. Kate promised to return in 7 years, and then again in 107 years. There were reports of a minor resurgence of activity in 1828, but nothing like the original intensity. The legacy of the Bell, which is profound in American folklore. It's a story that has been passed down through generations, the chilling tale of an unseen force that terrorized a family and an entire community. The cave on the former Bell property, known as the Bell Witch Cave, remains a site of pilgrimage for paranormal enthusiasts, and many claim to still experience strange phenomena there. You can almost feel the lingering presence in the Tennessee hills, the echo of that harsh, mocking voice. The Bell Witch haunting is a stark reminder that sometimes the most terrifying entities are not tied to a grand, decaying mansion, but can invade the simplest of homes, bringing with them a very personal and articulate form of horror. It challenges the notion that ghosts are merely silent specters, presenting instead an entity that was an active, vocal, and malevolent member of the household. Whether they liked it or not, from the vocal torment of the Bell Witch, your journey now takes you to the other side of the world, to the sun-baked plains of rural Australia. Here, we visit a grand homestead with a history steeped in sorrow and alleged spectral residents, Monte Cristo Homestead. Located near the town of Junee, New South Wales, this Victorian-era manor is often cited as Australia's most haunted private residence, a place where the echoes of past grief and untimely deaths seem to cling to the very fabric of the building. You approach it perhaps at dusk, the imposing two-story structure standing starkly against the vast, empty landscape, a silent sentinel guarding its tragic tales. Monte Cristo was built in 1884 to 1885 by Christopher William Crawley, a local farmer who had amassed considerable wealth. He and his wife Elizabeth raised their family there, and for a time, it was a symbol of prosperity and colonial ambition. However, the history of Monte Cristo is punctuated by a series of unfortunate and often tragic events, which form the foundation of its haunted reputation. You can almost picture the Crawleys in their prime, presiding over this grand estate, unaware of the sorrow that will become so deeply intertwined with its legacy. It's like they bought a lottery ticket for a dream house, but the fine print included a lifetime subscription to Unexplained Phenomena Monthly. The litany of tragedies associated with Monte Cristo is extensive. One of the earliest and most heartbreaking stories is that of a young child, believed to be an infant daughter of one of the Crawley family's maids or possibly a Crawley child, who died after falling down the main staircase. Her tiny handprints are sometimes said to appear, and the sound of a child crying or a baby's laughter is reportedly heard near the stairs. Imagine the sudden, sickening thud, the horrified screams, an accident that would leave an indelible mark of sorrow on any home. Then there's the tale of the stable boy. According to local legend, a young man working in the stables was either deliberately set on fire by a disgruntled employee or accidentally burned to death in a straw fire. His agonizing screams are sometimes said to echo around the stable area, and his spectral figure has reportedly been seen. Another story involves a mentally disabled man named Harold, son of one of the caretakers who lived at Monte Cristo after the Crawleys. He was supposedly kept chained in the dairy outbuilding for many years due to his unpredictable behavior. He was found dead there, and his restless spirit is said to haunt the dairy with reports of rattling chains and an oppressive atmosphere. The sheer accumulation of these unfortunate events creates a palpable sense of unease around the property. It's less a homestead and more a collection point for bad luck and spectral IOUs that misses. Elizabeth Crawley herself is one of the most prominent spirits said to haunt Monte Cristo. After Christopher Crawley died in 1910, Elizabeth reportedly became a recluse. She rarely left the house, converting the upstairs ballroom into a chapel and spending much of her time there, grieving. She died in a house in 1933. Her imposing, often stern apparition has been seen in various parts of the house, particularly in her former bedroom and near the chapel. Visitors report feeling her presence, a cold spot, or the sensation of being watched. Some even claim to have been touched or pushed by an unseen force attributed to her. The mainstream historical fact is that the Crawley family did experience several documented deaths on the property or among family members connected to it, which, combined with the house's age and isolated setting, has fueled its haunted reputation. The house fell into disrepair after the last of the Crawley family left in 1948. It stood empty and neglected for many years, becoming a target for vandals and a repository for local ghost stories. In 1963, Reginald and Olive Ryan purchased the dilapidated homestead and began the painstaking process of restoring it to its former glory. It was during this restoration, and in the years since, that many of the paranormal claims have been documented and publicized. The Ryans themselves, and their subsequent family members who continue to run Monte Cristo as a tourist attraction and bed and breakfast, have reported numerous unexplained occurrences. They are, in a sense, living curators of the house's haunted legacy. It's like buying a fixer-upper, but the previous tenants refuse to move out and occasionally rearrange the spectral furniture. Historians still argue whether the sheer concentration of tragic events at Monte Cristo is statistically unusual for a property of its age and history, or if the power of suggestion, amplified by its isolated location and the storytelling of its owners and visitors, has created a self-perpetuating legend. The human mind is adept at finding patterns and attributing meaning, especially in places that evoke a strong emotional response. One quirky or fringe tidbit about Monte Cristo is the boys' room, where visitors often report feeling particularly uneasy or even physically ill. It's said that if you stand in a certain spot in this room, you can feel an intense pressure or a sense of being unwelcome. Some mediums and paranormal investigators have claimed this room has a particularly dark energy, though the specific source is often debated. Perhaps it's just bad feng shui, or maybe a particularly grumpy spectral teenager who really wants his privacy. The phenomena reported at Monte Cristo are varied: disembodied voices, lights turning on and off by themselves, objects moving, full-bodied apparitions, and sudden temperature changes. The sheer range of reported activity is what makes it such a compelling location for ghost hunters and enthusiasts. You walk through its carefully restored Victorian rooms, the antique furniture gleaming in the dim light, and it's easy to imagine the layers of history pressing in on you. The rustle of a silk dress, a faint whisper, a cold breath on your neck, are these tricks of the imagination, or are the former residents of Monte Cristo still making their presence known? The isolation of the homestead likely plays a role in its atmosphere. Surrounded by the vast, often harsh Australian landscape, Monte Cristo feels like a world unto itself, a place where the past is very much present. It's a reminder that tragic histories are not confined to ancient castles or bustling city mansions. They can take root in any place where human lives have unfolded, where joy has been overshadowed by sorrow, and where death has left its indelible mark. The sorrow of Monte Cristo is a heavy cloak, one that visitors can still feel, a palpable echo of lives lived and tragically lost. From the sorrow-laden homestead of the Australian outback your spectral journey takes you back to England, to a location far older, steeped in legends that predate even the Norman conquest. You brave the chilling energies of an inn with a dark pre-Christian history, the ancient Ram Inn in Watton-under-Edge, Gloucestershire. This isn't your charming, cozy countryside pub. This is a building that seems to exude an almost palpable sense of dread, a place where layers of dark history, pagan rituals, and violent deaths are said to have coalesced into a potent and often terrifying haunting. You're approaching it now, perhaps on a typically damp English evening, the crooked, ancient timbers of the inn seeming to sag under the weight of centuries, its small, dark windows like accusing eyes. The ancient Ram Inn claims to be one of the oldest buildings in England, with parts of its structure purportedly dating back to 1145. It's built on land that, according to local legend and the claims of its late owner, John Humphreys, was once a pagan burial ground, possibly dating back over 5,000 years. This pre-Christian connection is central to the inn's most disturbing lore. The theory goes that the site itself is a nexus of powerful ley lines, ancient, invisible pathways of terrestrial energy, and that these energies, combined with the pagan rituals once performed there, have created a kind of spiritual vortex, drawing in and trapping entities. It's like building your B&B on a spiritual superhighway, but forgetting to install proper off-ramps for the less desirable spectral traffic. The inn's history is a grim tapestry. It was originally built to house masons and workers constructing the nearby St. Mary's Church. Over the centuries, it has served as a public house, a private residence, and a guest house. And through it all, it has accumulated stories of dark deeds. Tales of witchcraft, ritual sacrifice, specifically child sacrifice, a particularly horrific claim often associated with its alleged pagan roots, and murder are woven into its fabric. John Humphreys, who owned the inn from 1968 until his death in 2017, was a fervent believer in its hauntings and dedicated his life to uncovering its secrets and sharing its terrifying tales. He claimed to have found evidence of devil worship and black magic, including skeletal remains of children beneath the floorboards, though these claims are often disputed and lack definitive archaeological verification. The sheer number and variety of alleged entities said to inhabit the ancient Ram Inn are staggering. There's the witch, a woman believed to have been burned at the stake in the 1500s after taking refuge in the inn. Her spirit is said to haunt one of the rooms, and some visitors have reported feeling a malevolent female presence. Then there's the high priestess, presumably from its pagan past, and even a Roman centurion has been reported. More disturbingly, there are claims of non-human entities, demonic presences, including an incubus and a succubus, said to prey on visitors, particularly those sleeping in certain rooms. You can imagine trying to get a good night's sleep with that kind of spectral menagerie, allegedly sharing your accommodations. Excuse me, is the demon extra, or is that included in the room rate? The mainstream historical fact is that the ancient Ram Inn is indeed a very old building, likely with medieval origins, located in an area with a long history of human settlement. Its age and continuous use over centuries naturally lend themselves to the accumulation of local legends and folklore, which have been significantly amplified in modern times by paranormal investigations and media attention point. One of the most infamous rooms is the Bishop's Room. This room, located on the first floor, is considered by many to be the most active and terrifying part of the inn. Guests have reported being grabbed, pushed, and even levitated. They speak of oppressive atmospheres, disembodied voices, and shadowy figures. John Humphreys himself claimed to have been dragged from his bed by an unseen force in this room on his first night in the inn. The name Bishop's Room is somewhat ironic, given the dark activities said to have occurred there, or perhaps it refers to some long-forgotten ecclesiastical connection, now overshadowed by more sinister tales. Historians still argue whether the claims of pagan rituals and human sacrifice on the site have any basis in archaeological fact or are primarily the product of folklore, later embellishments, and the vivid imagination of its long-term owner. Proving such ancient clandestine activities definitively is incredibly difficult, relying often on interpretations of scarce evidence and local hearsay. A quirky or fringe tidbit connected to the ancient Ram Inn is John Humphrey's collection of strange and unsettling artifacts found within the building and its grounds. These included daggers, ritualistic-looking objects, and those alleged skeletal remains. He displayed these items as proof of the inn's dark past, adding to its mystique and its terrifying reputation. Whether genuine evidence of dark practices or simply a macabre collection, they certainly contributed to the inn's oppressive atmosphere. It's like a museum curated by your most eccentric, ghost-obsessed uncle. The inn's location, allegedly at the intersection of ley lines, is a concept popular in esoteric circles but not recognized by mainstream archaeology or geology. However, for believers, this alignment is key to understanding the intensity of the paranormal activity. The idea is that these energy lines amplify spiritual phenomena, making the inn a kind of beacon for the supernatural. You can almost feel a strange thrumming energy in the air, or perhaps it's just the ancient timbers groaning under the strain of so many ghostly tenants and the weight of expectation from thrill-seeking visitors. The reputation of the ancient Ram Inn has been significantly boosted by numerous television ghost hunting shows, whose crews often report dramatic and frightening experiences. This media exposure has turned it into a mecca for paranormal enthusiasts from around the world, all eager to brave a night within its reputedly haunted walls. You picture them, armed with EMF meters and night vision cameras, huddled in the dark, waiting for a sign from the other side, while the inn itself seems to watch and wait, its ancient stones holding secrets that may never be fully understood. It stands as a chilling testament to the idea that some places are not just haunted by human spirits, but by something older, darker, and more primal, rooted in the very land itself. Leaving the ancient, pagan-tinged dread of the Ram Inn, your journey takes you back across the Atlantic to a far more modern setting, yet one that quickly garnered a reputation for intense and disturbing paranormal activity. We examine the disturbing modern case of a child spirit in Kansas, the Sallie House. Located in Atchison, Kansas, a town already known for its haunted history, this unassuming white frame house on North 2nd Street became infamous in the early 1990s due to the terrifying experiences of its then tenants, Tony and Deborah Pickman. You approach the house, seemingly ordinary from the outside, perhaps with a child's swing set in the yard, giving no outward clue to the unsettling claims that have made it a staple of paranormal television and investigation. The story of the Sallie House haunting, as popularized by the Pickmans, centers around the spirit of a young girl named Sally. According to the narrative that developed, Sally was a girl who died in the house around the turn of the 20th century during an emergency appendectomy performed by Dr. Charles Finney, who supposedly lived and practiced there. The legend claims the operation was rushed, Sally wasn't fully anesthetized, and she died on the operating table, her last conscious moments filled with terror and the sight of the doctor looming over her. This traumatic death, the story goes, tethered her spirit to the house, particularly to the room believed to have been the doctor's operating room, which later became the Pickmans' nursery. It's a heartbreaking origin story designed to evoke sympathy, but the alleged manifestations of Sally were often far from benign, especially towards Tony. When Tony and Deborah Pickman, a young couple expecting their first child, moved into the house in 1992, they were initially unaware of its purported history. The strange occurrences began subtly. Unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and their dog often barking or growling at empty spaces, particularly near the nursery. You can imagine their initial confusion, perhaps dismissing it as an old house settling, or the stress of impending parenthood playing tricks on their minds. Easy to blame the dog, too. Dogs are always seeing things we can't, usually squirrels with vendettas or particularly offensive mailmen. However, the activity escalated dramatically and seemed to focus its aggression on Tony. He began to experience physical attacks. Scratches would appear on his chest, back, and arms, often in sets of 3, a pattern sometimes associated with demonic activity rather than a playful child spirit. He will be pushed, shoved, and burned by unseen forces. Fires would spontaneously erupt in the house, only to extinguish themselves just as quickly. Objects would fly across rooms, seemingly aimed at him. Deborah, on the other hand, experienced far less direct aggression, though she witnessed many of the attacks on Tony and the other strange phenomena. This disparity in the spirit's behavior is one of the puzzling aspects of the case. Why target Tony with such violence? The spirit of Sally also made her presence known in other ways. Toys in the nursery will be found arranged in circles or patterns. Cold spots were common. The Pickmans reported seeing apparitions not just of a young girl, but also of an older woman and sometimes a shadowy male figure. The mainstream historical fact is that the Pickman family did report a series of escalating and often violent phenomena during their tenancy at the Atchison house, which brought the location to the attention of paranormal investigators and media, solidifying its Sally House moniker. Paranormal investigators became involved, including teams from the television show Sightings. During these investigations, some of the most compelling evidence, or at least the most dramatic footage, was captured. Audio recordings picked up disembodied voices, and video footage purportedly showed objects moving and Tony being scratched. The case became a sensation in paranormal circles, seen by some as strong evidence of poltergeist activity, possibly centered around Tony, or the presence of a troubled and at times malevolent child spirit. Maybe Sally just really disliked Tony's taste in shirts. Kids can be harsh critics. Historians still argue whether the Sally House phenomena were genuinely supernatural, a complex hoax, or perhaps a combination of misidentified natural occurrences and psychological distress amplified by the power of suggestion and media attention. The fact that the most violent activity was directed at one individual, while others were less affected, is a common pattern in some poltergeist cases, which are often theorized to unconsciously revolve around a specific agent in the household. One quirky or fringe tidbit about the Sally House is the Sally's Wall phenomenon. During investigations, and even after the Pickmans moved out, visitors would leave toys or write messages to Sally on the walls of the nursery. Sometimes, names or symbols would reportedly appear on the walls seemingly in response, or existing writing will be altered. This interactive element, whether genuine or a product of human intervention over time, has added to the house's mystique and the sense of an ongoing communication with its alleged spectral resident. It's like a ghostly guest book, but with more existential dread. The previous tenants before the Pickmans and subsequent tenants and investigators after them have reported varying degrees of activity, though none quite as consistently violent as what the Pickmans described. Some have experienced nothing at all, leading to further debate about the nature of the haunting. Is it tied to specific people, or is the house itself the source? The narrative of Sally, the little girl who died tragically, is a powerful one. It elicits empathy and a desire to understand. However, the violent nature of many of the reported events, particularly the scratches and fires, seems to go beyond the actions of a playful or merely confused child spirit, leading some to speculate that something darker might have been at play, perhaps mimicking or masquerading as a child. Today, the Sally House is a well-known paranormal tourist destination. It can be rented for overnight stays by brave souls eager to experience its phenomena firsthand. You can almost picture these modern-day ghost hunters, armed with their equipment, settling in for the night, listening for the sound of a child's footsteps, or bracing for something more aggressive. The legacy of the Sally House is a potent mix of tragic child ghost story and narrative of terrifying physical attack, a combination that continues to fascinate and frighten those who delve into its story. It serves as a chilling reminder that even an ordinary-looking house in a quiet Kansas town can become the stage for extraordinary and deeply unsettling claims of the paranormal. From the visceral modern haunting of the Sally House, your spectral sojourn now takes you across the wild Atlantic, to the rugged coastline of Ireland, a land steeped in ancient folklore, where the veil between worlds often seems particularly thin. Here, you witness the Irish legend of a card game and a demonic visitor at Loftus Hall. Perched on the Hook Peninsula in County Wexford, this grand, imposing mansion, exposed to the full fury of the Atlantic gales, is the setting for one of Ireland's most enduring and dramatic ghost stories, a tale that blends aristocratic life with a chilling brush with the infernal. You approach it, the wind whipping around you, the gray stone of the hall looking brooding and isolated against the turbulent sky, the crash of waves providing a constant, mournful soundtrack. The story of Loftus Hall, as it is most famously told, dates back to the mid-18th century, though the site itself has a much longer history, with a castle originally built there by Raymond le Gros, a Norman knight, in 1170. The Redmond family owned the property for centuries before it was confiscated by Cromwellian forces and eventually passed to the Loftus family. The mansion you see today largely dates from extensive rebuilding in the 1870s, but the core legend is rooted in the earlier Georgian house that stood on the site. It's a place where layers of history overlap, each adding to its mystique. It's like a historical lasagna, but instead of delicious cheese, it's layers of potential ghostly tenants. The most famous legend centers around in Tottenham. The Tottenham family came into possession of the hall through marriage in the 1680s. One stormy night, so the story goes, often dated around 1765 or 1775, though precise dating is part of folklore, a ship was forced to take shelter in the nearby Slade Harbor. A mysterious, handsome stranger from the ship made his way to Loftus Hall and was invited in by the Tottenham family to wait out the storm. He was charming and witty, and soon a card game was underway, with Young and Tottenham partnering the stranger. You can picture the scene, the flickering candlelight, the howling wind outside, the polite conversation around a card table, a veneer of aristocratic normalcy about to be shattered. During the game, and supposedly dropped a card. As she bent down to retrieve it from beneath the table, she glanced at the stranger's feet and saw, to her horror, that instead of human feet, he possessed a cloven hoof, the quintessential sign of the devil. Her scream pierced the air. The stranger, his true nature revealed, shot up through the ceiling, leaving a large hole in the roof that, according to legend, could never be properly repaired. Some versions say he vanished in a puff of smoke and a sulfurous smell. It's quite the party trick, a bit more dramatic than just making the host's best silver disappear. Poor Tottenham was, by all accounts, profoundly traumatized by this encounter. She reportedly descended into madness, locked away by her family in her favorite room, the tapestry room, to avoid scandal and embarrassment. There she sat staring out at the sea, her mind broken, until her death a few years later. Her ghost, a sorrowful spectral figure known as the Lady in Silk, is said to haunt Loftus Hall, particularly the tapestry room and the staircase. Visitors have reported seeing her apparition, hearing her footsteps, and feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness. The mainstream historical fact is that Loftus Hall is indeed an old property with a long and varied history, and the legend of the demonic card player and the subsequent haunting by in Tottenham has been a prominent part of local folklore for generations, attracting significant interest. The story of the cloven-hoofed stranger is a classic motif in folklore, appearing in various forms in different cultures. It taps into deep-seated fears of the unknown, the deceptive nature of evil, and the vulnerability of the domestic sphere to demonic intrusion. The card game itself, often seen as a frivolous or even sinful pastime in stricter religious contexts, becomes the gateway for this dark encounter. Historians still argue whether the Loftus Hall legend has any basis in a real event, perhaps a traumatic encounter with a real person that was later embellished into a demonic tale, or if it's purely a symbolic folk narrative warning against the dangers of welcoming unknown influences into the home and heart. One quirky or fringe tidbit about Loftus Hall is the story of Father Thomas Broaders. After Anne's death and the continued disturbances attributed to her spirit and perhaps the lingering demonic influence, the family reportedly called upon Father Broaders, a local Catholic priest, to perform an exorcism. He was said to have been successful in calming the house, though Anne's spirit was not entirely banished. The hole in the ceiling, however, was supposedly finally repaired after his intervention. This element adds another layer to the legend, incorporating themes of faith versus evil and the power of religious rites to combat supernatural malevolence. It's like calling a spiritual plumber to fix a demonic leak. The hall has passed through various owners and has had periods of vacancy and restoration. It has served as a private residence, a convent, and a hotel, with each phase potentially adding new layers to its ghostly tapestry. During its time as a convent run by the Benedictine order, the nuns reportedly also experienced unexplained phenomena. Later, as a hotel, guests and staff share their own tales of ghostly encounters. You can almost hear the whispers and footsteps echoing through its long, empty corridors, the salt-laden wind rattling the window panes like skeletal fingers. The dramatic setting of Loftus Hall, on its exposed, wind-swept peninsula, undoubtedly contributes to its eerie atmosphere. The constant sound of the sea, the isolation, and the sheer age of the building create a perfect backdrop for such a chilling tale. It's a place where the natural elements seem to conspire with the supernatural legends. When you visit such a place, it's hard not to feel the weight of its stories, the tragic echo of Tottenham's fate, and the unsettling possibility that some uninvited guests might just overstay their welcome in the most dramatic way imaginable. The tale of the card game at Loftus Hall serves as a potent reminder that even within the supposed safety of a grand home, a chance encounter can open a door to terrifying otherworldly possibilities. Leaving the wind-swept coast of Ireland and its demonic card player, your journey takes you back to the American Midwest, to a small Iowa town that became the scene of one of the most gruesome and baffling unsolved crimes in American history, a crime that has left an indelible stain and a lingering, oppressive haunt on the house where it occurred. We walk through the Iowa house still haunted by an unsolved, brutal crime, the Villisca Axe Murder House. Located in Villisca, Iowa, this modest, white-frame house stands as a grim monument to a night of unimaginable horror that took place over a century ago, its unresolved nature feeding the belief that the spirits of the victims remain, restless and seeking justice. The night of June 9, 1912, was like any other in the quiet, respectable town of Villisca. Josiah B. Moore, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, and 2 young house guests, Lena and Dinah Stillinger, sisters who were friends of Catherine Moore, all attended an evening service at the local Presbyterian church. Afterward, the group walked home together, a picture of early 20th century idyllic family life. They entered the house around 9:30 or 10 p.m., sometime between midnight and the early morning hours of June 10th. An unknown assailant or assailants entered the Moore home and, using an axe belonging to Josiah Moore, bludgeoned all 8 people to death as they slept in their beds. You're standing outside the house now, under the Iowa sky, and a chill seems to emanate from its very clapboards, coldness that has nothing to do with the weather. The discovery of the crime the next morning by concerned neighbors sent shockwaves through Villisca and across the nation. The brutality was staggering. All victims had suffered severe head trauma from the axe. The ceilings above some of the beds bore gouge marks from the upswing of the weapon. The killer had covered the faces of the victims with bedclothes after their deaths, and all the mirrors in the house had been covered with cloths. A kerosene lamp was found at the foot of Josiah and Sarah's bed, its chimney off, the wick turned back, suggesting the killer may have used it, but its fuel had run out. A plate of uneaten food and a bowl of bloody water were found on the kitchen table. These strange, almost ritualistic details only deepened the mystery and the horror. It was less a murder, more a grotesque, silent tableau left for the world to find. The investigation was immediate and widespread, but ultimately fruitless. Numerous suspects were considered, including a traveling minister with a history of mental illness, Frank Fernando Jones, a prominent Villisca resident and Josiah Moore's former employer, with whom Moore had a contentious business rivalry, and even a potential serial killer named Henry Lee Moore, no relation. And though he committed similar axe murders, his timeline didn't perfectly align with Villisca. Despite several grand jury investigations and even a trial of Reverend George Kelly, the aforementioned minister, who was acquitted, no one was ever convicted of the murders. The crime remains officially unsolved. The mainstream historical fact is that the brutal axe murders of the 8 Moore family members and Stillinger guests in Villisca, Iowa, in June 1912, are an unsolved crime that generated intense national interest and has since become a prominent case in American true crime and paranormal lore. The house itself, the scene of such profound violence and unresolved tragedy, quickly gained a reputation for being haunted. Locals whispered of strange noises, cold spots, and an oppressive atmosphere. Children dared each other to approach it. Over the decades, as the house passed through various owners, tales of paranormal activity persisted. Lights turning on and off, objects moving, disembodied voices, and even apparitions of children have been reported. You can almost hear the faint, sorrowful whispers of the children, their lives so cruelly cut short, forever echoing within those walls. It's the kind of place where the silence itself feels heavy, laden with unspoken trauma. In the 1990s, the house was purchased and restored to its 1912 appearance, with the specific aim of preserving it as a historical site and, controversially for some, a location for paranormal investigations and overnight stays. This has, of course, amplified its haunted reputation. Teams of ghost hunters, television crews, and curious individuals have spent countless hours within its walls, many reporting unsettling experiences. The children's bedroom upstairs is often cited as a hotspot for activity, with reports of children's laughter, toys moving, and even physical interaction like tugging on clothes. It's like the spirits are still there, hoping someone will finally understand what happened, or perhaps just wanting to play, their innocent games now tinged with an unbearable sadness. Historians still argue whether the paranormal claims associated with the Villisca Axe murder house are genuine manifestations of the victim's spirits, psychological responses to the horrific nature of the crime and the house's grim atmosphere, or simply the product of suggestion and the commercialization of its tragic history. The power of suggestion in such a place cannot be underestimated. Knowing the horrific events that transpire there primes the mind to interpret any unusual occurrence as paranormal. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the mirror covering aspect. The killer covering the mirrors is a detail that has fascinated and puzzled investigators and paranormal enthusiasts alike. In some folk traditions, mirrors are believed to be portals or capable of trapping souls. Covering them after a death was sometimes done to prevent the deceased spirit from becoming trapped or to prevent the living from seeing their own death reflected. Did the killer have some rudimentary understanding of such beliefs, or was there a more practical, if equally disturbing, reason? Perhaps they simply couldn't bear to see their own reflection after committing such an act. It's a chilling detail that adds another layer of ritualistic strangeness to an already incomprehensible crime. Today, the Villisca Axe murder house stands as a dark tourist destination. Visitors can tour the house, and the truly brave or perhaps foolhardy can arrange to stay overnight. You can imagine the experience, settling down in one of those period-furnished rooms, knowing what happened there, every creak of the floorboards, every shadow, every whisper of the wind taking on a sinister new meaning. The unresolved nature of the crime seems to fuel the haunting. With no justice for the victims, no definitive answer to who or why, the energy of that horrific night feels trapped, replaying itself in the very fabric of the house. It's a place where history, true crime, and the paranormal intersect in a deeply unsettling way, a constant grim reminder of a night when a small Iowa town lost its innocence, and the house gained a legacy of terror that endures to this day. From the chilling, unresolved crime scene in rural Iowa Your journey takes you to a city steeped in centuries of history, a place where the layers of the past are not just metaphorical but physically accessible. Edinburgh, Scotland. You explore the haunted vaults beneath Scotland's historic, shadowed capital, a subterranean world that once teemed with life, desperation, and death, and is now renowned as one of the most supernaturally active locations in the United Kingdom. You descend from the bustling Royal Mile down narrow, slick stone steps, the sound of the modern city fading above you, replaced by a damp, echoing silence and a palpable sense of antiquity. The Edinburgh Vaults, also known as the South Bridge Vaults, are a series of chambers formed within the 19 arches of the South Bridge, which was completed in 1788. The bridge was built to span the Cowgate Ravine, connecting the High Street to the university areas. The vaults were originally intended for use as storage space and workshops for the businesses on the bridge above: taverns, cobblers, smelters, and other tradesmen. For a time, they served this purpose. You can almost imagine the bustling activity, the clatter of tools, the shouts of merchants, the hidden underbelly to the elegant city developing above. However, the vaults were poorly constructed and suffered from chronic dampness due to inadequate waterproofing. Water seeped in relentlessly, making them unsuitable for legitimate businesses. As legitimate tenants moved out, a different kind of population moved in. The vaults became home to the city's poorest and most desperate inhabitants, slum dwellings in the dark, cramped, and unsanitary conditions. They also became a notorious red light district and a haven for criminal activity, including illegal gambling dens, illicit distilleries, and, according to some of the grimmer legends, body snatchers like the infamous Burke and Hare, who supposedly used the vaults to store corpses before selling them to the medical schools for dissection. It's like the city swept its problems under a very large, very damp stone rug. The conditions in the vaults were appalling. Overcrowding, lack of sanitation, darkness, and disease were rampant. Many souls perished there in misery and anonymity. Eventually, by the mid-19th century, the vaults were deemed uninhabitable and were largely abandoned and filled in with rubble, forgotten by the city. Above for over a century. The mainstream historical fact is that the South Bridge vaults were indeed used for commerce and later as slum housing and for illicit activities in the late 18th and early 19th centuries before being largely abandoned and sealed. Their rediscovery in the 1980s by a former Scottish rugby international, Norrie Rowan, who excavated one vault and found it led to others, brought this forgotten chapter of Edinburgh's history back to life. Since their rediscovery and excavation, the vaults have become a focal point for paranormal investigation and ghost tours. The sheer weight of human suffering, poverty, and crime that occurred within these stone chambers is believed by many to have left a profound psychic imprint. You're walking through them now, the only light often coming from your guide's lantern or the dim emergency lighting. The air is cold and heavy, the silence broken only by the drip of water and the echo of your own footsteps. It's easy to feel a sense of unease, a prickling on your skin. Numerous distinct entities and phenomena are reported. One of the most famous is Mr. Boots, a malevolent spirit said to make his presence known through heavy footsteps echoing through the stone corridors, often when no one is visibly there. He's sometimes described as a stern, abusive figure, perhaps a former overseer or a criminal who met a violent end. Then there's the Watcher, a shadowy figure often seen lurking in doorways or at the end of passages, observing visitors. Apparitions of ragged children, ghostly women, perhaps former prostitutes or grieving mothers, and even spectral animals have been reported. It's like a subterranean spectral cast call for the city's most unfortunate. Physical sensations are also commonly reported: sudden temperature drops, being touched or pushed by unseen hands, hair being pulled, and even scratches. Disembodied voices, whispers, and cries are frequently heard. The oppressive atmosphere in certain vaults is so intense that some visitors become overwhelmed with emotion, sadness, fear, or even anger. Historians still argue whether the intense paranormal claims are solely attributable to the grim history and oppressive environment stimulating the imagination, or if there is a genuine residual haunting stemming from the immense human suffering that saturated the vaults. One quirky or fringe tidbit about the Edinburgh vaults is the discovery of a witchcraft temple or pagan circle in one of the deeper, less accessible vaults. During excavations, a crudely drawn circle with other symbols was found on the floor of one chamber, leading to speculation about its use for occult rituals, either historically or more recently. While its exact origin and purpose are debated, it could be modern graffiti. It adds another layer of mystique and potential darkness to the already grim reputation of the vaults. You can almost imagine a clandestine gathering, huddled in the flickering torchlight, attempting to commune with forces best left undisturbed. Or maybe it was just some very bored teenagers with chalk. The vaults are a powerful reminder of the hidden histories that lie beneath our modern cities. They represent a forgotten underclass, whose lives and deaths were largely unrecorded and unmourned. The belief that their spirits linger, trapped in the dark, damp chambers where they suffered, is a potent one. You feel a sense of compassion for these lost souls, mixed with the undeniable thrill of fear that comes with exploring such an intensely atmospheric and reputedly haunted location. Today, various tour companies lead groups through sections of the vaults, recounting their dark history and chilling ghost stories. Some offer more intensive paranormal investigation experiences. The very act of descending into this underground world feels like stepping back in time, into a place where the veil between the living and the dead feels exceptionally thin. The stones themselves seem to cry out with the misery they've witnessed, and as you emerge back into the bustling streets of Edinburgh, the sounds of the city seem a little sharper, the sunlight a little brighter, after your sojourn in the shadowed underworld where Edinburgh's phantoms are said to dwell. Having explored these deeply unsettling locations, from grand mansions to humble farmhouses and subterranean vaults, each with its own chilling tales and resident specters, your thoughts naturally turn to those who actively seek out such encounters. We delve into the tools, methods, and ethics of paranormal investigation. The image of the ghost hunter, armed with an array of gadgets, creeping through a darkened, reputedly haunted building, has become a familiar one in popular culture. But what really goes into trying to document and understand these alleged phenomena? You find yourself considering the motivations, the techniques, and the inherent challenges of this rather unusual field of inquiry. The modern paranormal investigator often employs a range of technological tools, a far cry from the Victorian seance conductor, relying on creaking tables and disembodied raps alone. The aim is to capture objective evidence of something anonymous or malice, something that defies conventional explanation. One of Earth's most common tools is the EMF electromagnetic field meter. The theory here, popularized by paranormal researchers, is that spirits may disrupt or manifest as fluctuations in the electromagnetic field. So investigators will sweep rooms with these devices, looking for spikes or changes that don't have an obvious natural source, like faulty wiring or nearby appliances. You can picture the investigator, meter in hand, watching the needle jump or the lights flash, a silent conversation with the unseen. Is that you, Great Aunt Mildred, or just a badly shielded microwave? Then there are audio recording devices, from simple digital voice recorders, DVRs, to more sophisticated binaural microphones designed to capture sound in a way that mimics human hearing. Investigators conduct EVP, electronic voice phenomenon sessions, where they ask questions into the silence and then play back the recordings, listening intently for faint whispers or responses that weren't audible at the time. These alleged spirit voices are often faint, open to interpretation, and sometimes dismissed as auditory pareidolia, the brain finding patterns in random noise. But to a believer who hears a distinct, relevant answer to a question, it can be compelling evidence. Remember that Bell Witch with her very clear, non-EVP required communication? Most investigators wish it were always that straightforward, though perhaps less abusive. Visual evidence is often sought using still cameras, video cameras, and particularly night vision or full-spectrum cameras, which can capture light beyond the visible spectrum, infrared and ultraviolet. The hope is to capture apparitions, shadow figures, or unexplained lights and mists. Thermal imaging cameras are also popular, used to detect cold spots, sudden drops in temperature often associated with ghostly presences or unexplained heat signatures. You might see an investigator pointing a thermal camera at a spot where someone reported feeling a chill, looking for a human-shaped cold patch against a warmer background. A distinct lack of heat. Either a ghost or someone left the spectral freezer door open again. Motion sensors, laser grids, projecting a grid of light beams to detect movement, and even old-fashioned methods like sprinkling flour on the floor to capture footprints are also employed. The mainstream historical fact is that the organized, methodical investigation of paranormal phenomena dates back to the late 19th century, with the founding of organizations like the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, in London in 1882, which sought to apply scientific rigor to the study of psychic and paranormal claims, a pursuit that continues in various forms today. Beyond the technology, methodology is key. A typical investigation might involve historical research into the location, interviews with witnesses, and then a controlled lockdown in the allegedly haunted site, often at night, when such phenomena are anecdotally reported to be more active. Investigators will conduct vigils in different rooms, using their equipment, asking questions, and carefully documenting any perceived activity or environmental changes. The aim is to be systematic, to rule out natural explanations first. Is that bang the pipes, the wind, or something more? However, the field of paranormal investigation is not without its controversies and ethical considerations. There's a constant debate about what constitutes evidence. A blurry photo, a faint EVP, an EMF spike. These are often open to multiple interpretations. Skeptics argue that many investigators are too quick to attribute unexplained occurrences to the paranormal, failing to adequately explore all natural explanations or falling prey to confirmation bias. Historians still argue whether the modern ghost hunting phenomenon, with its reliance on technology and media exposure, is a genuine evolution in psychical research or more of a popular entertainment, blending scientific aspiration with thrill-seeking. Ethically, questions arise about respecting the potentially haunted locations, particularly private residences or sites of tragedy. Is it ethical to provoke or taunt spirits, as some more aggressive investigators do, in an attempt to elicit a response? What about the privacy and emotional well-being of living clients who believe their homes are haunted? Respect for the alleged spirits, often believed to be deceased human beings, is also a point of discussion among investigators themselves. The more thoughtful groups emphasize a respectful, research-oriented approach, rather than one focused purely on scares or sensationalism. It's the difference between being a paranormal journalist and a paranormal paparazzi. One quirky or fringe tidbit in paranormal investigation is the use of trigger objects, items that might have personal significance to the alleged spirits of a location, placed in an attempt to stimulate activity. This could be anything from a child's toy in a room where a child's spirit is reported, to period-specific items in a historic building. The idea is that these objects might evoke a response, like an old song joggling a memory. It's a bit like spiritual fishing, casting out a baited hook into the unseen. Ultimately, the pursuit of ghost hunting is driven by a fundamental human curiosity about life after death and the mysteries of the unknown. Whether you're a staunch believer, hardened skeptic, or somewhere in between, the dedication of these individuals who willingly spend their nights in some of the world's most reputedly unsettling places is fascinating. You can almost feel their quiet anticipation in the darkness, the hope of capturing that one piece of undeniable evidence that proves we are not alone, that there is something more beyond the veil. It's a quest as old as humanity, now equipped with digital recorders and infrared cameras, still seeking answers in the shadows. After journeying through these shadowed halls, subterranean vaults, and blood-soaked grounds, after considering the earnest, if sometimes controversial efforts of those who hunt for ghosts, you're left in the quiet of your own space, the tales of the night swirling in your mind. You ponder why these chilling spectral tales fascinate and unnerve us so deeply. What is it about a haunted house story that can send a shiver down your spine? Even when you're tucked safely in bed, the door's locked, the rational part of your brain insisting it's all just stories. It's a fascination as old as storytelling itself, a primal pull towards the unknown, the uncanny, and the things that whisper from just beyond the firelight. One of the most fundamental reasons for our enduring fascination is, quite simply, the question of mortality. Haunted house stories, at their core, grapple with the idea of what happens after we die. Do we simply cease to exist? Or does some part of us, a consciousness, a spirit, an echo, linger on? The thought of ghosts, of spirits tied to a place, offers a strange kind of comfort, even amidst the fear. It suggests a continuity, a persistence of self beyond the grave. If a house can be haunted, then perhaps death is not the absolute end. You might not want to be the one doing the haunting, endlessly rattling chains or moaning in the attic, but the very possibility implies something more. It's the ultimate FOMO, fear of missing out on existing. Then there's the delicious thrill of fear itself. Our brains are wired to respond to perceived threats, and a good ghost story can trigger that fight or flight response. In a controlled, safe environment, you get the adrenaline rush, the heightened senses, the racing heart, all without any actual danger. It's like riding a roller coaster. You're terrified and exhilarated at the same time, and you step off or turn off the video, feeling a little more alive. These stories allow us to confront our deepest anxieties: fear of the dark, fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of losing control, in a manageable way. That prickle on your neck we talked about earlier? That's your ancient survival instincts getting a little workout, courtesy of a well-told tale. Haunted house stories also tap into our profound connection to place, to home. A home is meant to be a sanctuary, a place of safety, comfort, and personal identity. The idea of that sanctuary being violated, corrupted, or inhabited by an unwelcome, unseen presence is deeply unsettling. It strikes at the heart of our need for security. If you can't be safe in your own home, where can you be safe? This violation of the domestic sphere is a powerful psychological trigger. The Amityville house, for example, looked like the epitome of the American dream home from the outside, which made its alleged internal corruption all the more horrifying. Remember those creepy quarter-round windows, like malevolent eyes? They became a symbol of domestic dread. Moreover, these tales often serve as cautionary narratives or moral allegories. The ghost is frequently a victim of injustice, like the spirits in the LaLaurie mansion. Their presence a constant reminder of unresolved wrongs. Or the spirit might be a wrongdoer, like some interpretations of Kate, the Bell Witch, for torment, a kind of ongoing supernatural punishment or a warning against certain behaviors. These stories can explore themes of guilt, retribution, and the persistence of past. The mainstream historical fact is that folklore and ghost stories have often served as informal methods of social control and historical memory, preserving tales of tragedy, injustice, or local taboos within a community, passed down through oral tradition long before widespread literacy or mass media. The unknown itself is a powerful magnet. In a world increasingly explained by science, where mysteries seem to shrink with each new discovery, the paranormal offers a tantalizing glimpse into a realm that defies easy explanation. It allows for a sense of wonder, of magic, even if it's a dark magic. Historians still argue whether the enduring belief in ghosts is a remnant of earlier, more superstitious modes of thought, or if it represents a persistent human intuition that there are dimensions of reality beyond our current scientific understanding. The very ambiguity is part of the allure. Is that creak the house settling, or is it her? The not knowing is what keeps you listening, questioning. The figure of the ghost itself is often a profoundly tragic one. Sarah Winchester, building her labyrinthine mansion to appease the spirits of those killed by her family's invention, and Tottenham, driven mad by a demonic encounter at Loftus Hall, the child victims of Aliska. These are figures of sorrow, loss, and trauma. Our fascination is tinged with empathy. We feel for these spectral figures, even as they frighten us. Their stories are often intensely human dramas, played out on a supernatural stage. It's like we're drawn to cosmic soap operas, where the stakes are eternal and the drama never truly ends. And let's be honest, there's a certain cozy thrill to being scared when you know you're actually safe. Curling up with a spooky story on a dark night, the wind howling outside, it's a classic comfort. It's the old whistling past the graveyard phenomenon. You engage with the fear, acknowledge it, and then return to the warmth and light of your own reality, perhaps feeling a little braver, or at least a little more appreciative of your non-haunted, you hope, surroundings. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the idea that some people are sensitives or psychically attuned and genuinely experience these phenomena more acutely than others. Whether this is a genuine sixth sense or a heightened susceptibility to suggestion is, of course, debated. But the belief that some individuals possess a special conduit to the spirit world adds another layer of intrigue to these tales. Perhaps you listening now feel a little more attuned to the subtle energies of your own home after this journey. Ultimately, these chilling spectral tales are about more than just ghosts. They are about us, our fears, our hopes, our history, our deep-seated need to find meaning and connection, even in the face of the inexplicable. They are a reflection of our own anxieties about the past's hold on the present and the enduring mystery of what lies beyond the veil. The shadows in the corner of your eye, the unexplained whisper, the sudden chill, these are the ingredients of a narrative as old as humanity, one that continues to hold us captive, listening for an answer in the silence of the night. Now, after immersing ourselves in these chilling narratives, feeling the prickle of unease and the allure of the unknown, it's only fair to acknowledge the other side of the spectral coin. We consider the logical explanations often behind supposed hauntings, because for every story that makes your hair stand on end, there's often a skeptic armed with reason and science, ready to shine a very bright, non-ghostly light into those shadowy corners. You find yourself, perhaps with a sigh of relief, or maybe a twinge of disappointment, stepping back from the abyss to examine the more mundane, but equally fascinating explanations for why a house might seem haunted. Point one of the most common culprits behind those things that go bump in the night is, as we touched upon way back in section 1, the house itself. Older houses, especially, are veritable orchestras of creaks, groans, and bangs. Temperature fluctuations cause materials like wood and metal to expand and contract. Think of the Winchester Mystery House with its endless, haphazard construction. That place must have been a symphony of settling noises, even without alleged spirits. Plumbing systems, especially older ones, can produce a bewildering array of gurgles, hisses, and knocking sounds, a phenomenon aptly named water hammer. Heating systems, from rattling radiators to clicking ductwork, contribute their own nocturnal concerts. It's not a ghostly lament, it's just your ancient boiler composing its nightly opera. Then there's the wind. A draft whistling through a loose window frame can sound remarkably like a whisper or a sigh. Wind can rattle doors, shutters, and even create pressure changes within a house that cause doors to open or close seemingly on their own. Remember the wind-swept Loftus Hall? The constant moan of the Atlantic gales through its ancient structure will be enough to unnerve anyone, even without a cloven hoof card player. The power of suggestion here is immense. If you're already primed to expect a ghost, that gust of wind becomes a spectral sigh. Infestation by animals is another common, if less romantic, explanation for mysterious noises. Mice or rats scurrying in the walls or attic can create scratching, tapping, and even sounds that mimic faint footsteps. Birds nesting in chimneys, squirrels in the eaves, or even raccoons exploring a crawl space can lead to a host of unexplained sounds. It's much less terrifying to think it's Stuart Little having a party in your walls than the restless spirit of a 17th century pirate, though arguably just as annoying. Psychological factors play a huge role in perceived hauntings. Auditory and visual pareidolia, as mentioned before, is our brain's tendency to perceive familiar patterns like faces or voices in random stimuli. That shadow in the corner of your eye becomes a fleeting figure. That jumble of sounds from the old pipes morphs into a whispered name. This isn't a sign of delusion. It's a normal cognitive process, but one that can easily contribute to a belief in ghosts if you're already feeling uneasy. It's your brain trying to make sense of the ambiguous, and sometimes it gets a little too creative for its own good. The power of suggestion is incredibly potent. If you move into a house that is reputed to be haunted, like the Amityville house or the Sally house, you're already predisposed to interpret unusual events through that lens. Every creak, every cold spot, every flickering light reinforces the narrative. Confirmation bias kicks in. You pay more attention to experiences that fit the haunted narrative and dismiss those that don't. The mainstream historical fact is that numerous psychological studies have demonstrated the significant impact of suggestion and belief on perception, showing that individuals primed to expect paranormal phenomena are more likely to report experiencing them, even in controlled environments with no actual anomalous stimuli. Environmental factors can also contribute to sensations often attributed to hauntings. Infrasound, which is sound below the range of human hearing, typically below 20 Hz, has been linked to feelings of unease, anxiety, dread, and even visual or auditory hallucinations. Sources of infrasound can include wind turbines, traffic, certain weather patterns, or even faulty appliances. The late researcher Vic Tandy famously proposed that a 19 Hz standing wave in his laboratory, caused by a new fan, was responsible for ghostly apparitions and feelings of depression experienced there. Could Mr. Boots in the Edinburgh vaults just be a particularly resonant low-frequency hum? Carbon monoxide poisoning is another, more dangerous, potential explanation for certain haunting experiences. Low levels of CO can cause headaches, dizziness, confusion, hallucinations, and feelings of dread, symptoms that could easily be misinterpreted as a supernatural assault, especially in older homes with poorly maintained heating systems or fireplaces. There are historical accounts where entire families reported ghostly phenomena that ceased once a faulty furnace or chimney was repaired. It's a stark reminder to always check your detectors. You might be dealing with a silent killer, not a silent spirit. Sleep paralysis is a common experience that can be terrifyingly misinterpreted as a ghostly attack. During REM sleep, our bodies are naturally paralyzed to prevent us from acting out our dreams. If you wake up mentally but your body is still in this paralyzed state, it can be accompanied by a feeling of pressure on the chest, the old hag phenomenon in folklore, a sense of a malevolent presence in the room, and auditory or visual hallucinations. Imagine waking up unable to move, feeling like someone is sitting on you, and seeing a shadowy figure in the corner. It's a recipe for a ghost story. Historians still argue whether historical accounts of incubi, succubi, and nocturnal demonic attacks, like those hinted at in the ancient Ramin, might be, in part, culturally interpreted experiences of sleep paralysis. One quirky or fringe tidbit in the realm of debunking is the sick building syndrome explanation for some group haunting experiences. Poor air quality, mold, some types of which can be neurotoxic, or other environmental contaminants within a building can lead to a range of physical and psychological symptoms in occupants, which, if unexplained, could be attributed to a supernatural cause. Maybe the LaLaurie mansion wasn't just haunted by its horrific past, but also by some seriously bad 19th century air quality. Acknowledging these rational explanations doesn't necessarily negate all paranormal claims, but it does provide a crucial framework for critical thinking. Before jumping to supernatural conclusions, It's important to exhaust the natural ones. Often, the ghost in the machine is just the machine itself, or the complex workings of our own minds and bodies. And sometimes, that's a far more fascinating mystery in its own right. Having explored the rational explanations that can often account for seemingly paranormal occurrences, it's also important to acknowledge that not all ghostly tales are born of misinterpretation or environmental quirks. Sometimes they are the result of outright deception. You uncover some famous paranormal hoaxes that fooled many, reminding us that human ingenuity, and occasionally avarice, can conjure spirits just as effectively as any alleged supernatural force. The history of paranormal investigation is, unfortunately, peppered with instances where the desire to believe, or the desire for fame and fortune, has led to carefully constructed illusions. One of the most foundational areas for paranormal hoaxes lies in the realm of spiritualism, particularly during its heyday in the mid-19th to early 20th centuries. The Fox sisters, Kate, Margaret, and Leah, are often credited with kickstarting the spiritualist movement in America in 1848 with their claims of communicating with a spirit through rapping sounds in their Hydesville, New York home. Their fame spread like wildfire, and soon seances, spirit mediums, and communication with the departed became a widespread phenomenon. You can imagine the parlors filled with grieving families, desperate for a sign from lost loved ones, ripe for both genuine belief and, sadly, exploitation. The mainstream historical fact is that Margaret Fox later confessed, in 1888, that the spirit rappings were a hoax, produced by cracking their toe and ankle joints. Though she later recanted this confession, the damage to the credibility of spiritualism's foundational claims was significant. The techniques of fraudulent mediums became increasingly sophisticated. Table tipping, where tables would seemingly levitate or move in response to spirit communication, could be achieved through subtle muscle movements, hidden levers, or even magnets. Spirit trumpets, through which disembodied voices would supposedly speak, could be manipulated by a medium skilled in ventriloquism or by concealed accomplices. Apparitions of ectoplasm, a cheesecloth-like substance said to emanate from the medium's body as a physical manifestation of spiritual energy, were often just cleverly hidden muslin, gauze, or even mixtures of soap, gelatin, and egg white, regurgitated or manipulated by the medium in darkened seance rooms. It's like a magic show, but with higher emotional stakes and worse lighting. Remember Harry Price and Borley Rectory? While he exposed many fraudulent mediums, Price himself was later accused by some of faking phenomena to bolster Borley's haunted reputation, though this remains a contentious point. Photography, a relatively new technology in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, quickly became another avenue for paranormal hoaxes. Spirit photography became a craze, with photographers claiming to capture images of deceased loved ones alongside their living relatives. William H. Mumler was one of the most famous or infamous spirit photographers. His images, showing ghostly figures hovering near his sitters, captivated many, including Mary Todd Lincoln, who posed for a photograph that appeared to show the spirit of her deceased husband, Abraham Lincoln. However, skeptics and photographic experts soon demonstrated that these effects could be easily achieved through double exposure, superimposed negatives, or pre-prepared plates. It's amazing what you can do with a bit of darkroom trickery and a willingness to exploit grief. Smile for the camera, and for your dear departed Uncle Ebenezer, who I just happened to have on file. Moving into the 20th century, hoaxes continued to evolve. The case of the Amityville Horror, which we delved into earlier, remains one of the most debated. While the Lutzes always maintained their story was true, the subsequent claims by Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s lawyer, William Weber, that he and the Lutzes created this horror story over many bottles of wine, cast a long shadow of doubt. The allure of book deals and movie rights can be a powerful motivator. Historians still argue whether the Amityville case was a genuine haunting exaggerated, a psychological phenomenon, or a deliberate, financially motivated fabrication. The truth is likely a complex mix, but the hoax accusations have undeniably stuck. Another fascinating, though less malevolent, example is the Cottingley fairies. In 1917, two young cousins in Cottingley, England, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, produced a series of photographs apparently showing them interacting with fairies in their garden. The photos captivated many, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, who, despite his famous detective's reliance on logic, was a fervent believer in spiritualism and the paranormal. Doyle even wrote a book, The Coming of the Fairies, 1922, championing the authenticity of the photos. It wasn't until the early 1980s that Elsie and Frances, by then elderly women, confessed that the fairies were cardboard cutouts copied from a children's book, held in place with hat pins. Frances, however, maintained until her death that one of the 5 photos were genuine. It's a charming hoax, in a way, born of youthful imagination rather than malice, but it demonstrates how easily even intelligent people can be fooled by seemingly convincing evidence, especially when they want to believe. One quirky or fringe tidbit regarding paranormal hoaxes is the Philip experiment, conducted in Toronto in 1972 by the Toronto Society for Psychical Research. This experiment aimed to see if a group of people could, through focused intention and belief, essentially create a ghost. The group invented a fictional historical character named Philip Aylesford, complete with a detailed backstory and personality. They then held seances to try and contact Philip. Astonishingly, they began to experience phenomena typical of a haunting: table rapping, lights flickering, and even the table levitating, all attributed to Philip. The researchers concluded that they hadn't contacted a pre-existing spirit, but that their collective psychic energy, or perhaps unconscious physical actions, had produced the phenomena. It wasn't a hoax in the traditional sense of deceiving an audience, but an experiment in self-deception or the power of group suggestion to manifest ghostly activity. It's like a DIY ghost kit, just add belief and a wobbly table. The rise of the internet and digital editing software has created a new frontier for paranormal hoaxes. Ghost apps can easily insert spectral figures into photographs, and videos can be cleverly edited to show objects moving or doors slamming. This makes the job of the genuine paranormal investigator, sifting through potential evidence, even more challenging. You see a compelling photo online. Is it a genuine capture of the unexplained, or just someone proficient with Photoshop having a bit of fun? Understanding the history of paranormal hoaxes is crucial for anyone interested in the subject. It fosters a healthy skepticism and highlights the importance of. Understanding the history of paranormal hoaxes is crucial for anyone interested in the subject. It fosters a healthy skepticism and highlights the importance of having considered the all-too-human capacity for deception and the rational explanations that can demystify many a ghostly tale. It's fascinating to broaden our perspective and see how these beliefs and experiences are shaped by different cultural lenses. We touch upon how different cultures perceive and interact with spirits, because the concept of a lingering soul or a haunted place is far from a uniquely Western obsession. Indeed, ghost beliefs are incredibly diverse, woven into the fabric of societies around the globe, each with its own unique interpretations, rituals, and ways of coexisting with the unseen. You find yourself marveling at the sheer variety of ways humanity has conceptualized what lies beyond the veil. In many East Asian cultures, for instance, ancestor worship plays a central role, and the spirits of the deceased are believed to maintain a strong connection to their living descendants and their former homes. In Japan, eerie are figures similar to Western ghosts, often spirits unable to rest due to a violent death, unresolved emotions, or improper burial rites. They might be tied to a specific location, seeking to rectify a wrong or simply replaying their tragic end. Traditional Japanese no theater often features eerie characters, their pale faces and long black hair becoming iconic representations. You can see echoes here of the mournful nun of Borley Rectory, though the cultural context and specific rituals for appeasement differ significantly. The Bon Festival, or Obon, is a major Japanese Buddhist custom where families honor the spirits of their ancestors, believing they return to visit their homes during this time. Lanterns are lit to guide the spirits, and offerings of food are made. It's a beautiful, communal way of acknowledging and welcoming the presence of the departed, a stark contrast to the fear-driven reactions often seen in Western hauntings. Chinese traditional beliefs also feature a complex spirit world. Guotian is a general term for spirits, which can include ancestors, Zhu, as well as potentially malevolent ghosts, Gui. Feng Shui, the ancient Chinese practice of harmonizing individuals with their surrounding environment, is partly concerned with ensuring a proper flow of energy, qi, to prevent negative spiritual influences in a home or building. Improper burial or a life filled with grievances can lead to a hungry ghost, a spirit that can cause trouble for the living. The Hungry Ghost Festival is another important tradition where offerings are made to appease these wandering spirits to prevent them from bringing misfortune. It's less about busting ghosts, more about placating them with a good meal and some respect. Here, have a spirit snack, and please don't rearrange the furniture again. In many parts of Africa, the spiritual world is deeply integrated into daily life. Ancestral spirits are often seen as active participants in the affairs of the living, capable of offering guidance and protection, but also of causing misfortune if neglected or angered. Traditional healers or spiritual leaders often act as intermediaries between the living and the spirit world, performing rituals to appease spirits, cleanse haunted locations, or divine the cause of spiritual disturbances. The concept of a haunted house might be understood not just as a place with a lingering human ghost, but as a site affected by nature spirits, curses, or witchcraft. The mainstream historical fact is that reverence for and interaction with ancestral spirits is a common thread in numerous indigenous spiritual traditions across Africa, influencing social customs, healing practices, and community well-being. Islamic tradition acknowledges the existence of jinn, genies, supernatural creatures that are not ghosts of deceased humans but a separate creation, made of smokeless fire. Jinn can be good, evil, or neutral, and they can interact with humans, sometimes choosing to inhabit homes or isolated places. Belief in jinn is widespread in many Muslim-majority countries, and stories of jinn encounters often share similarities with Western ghost stories. Unexplained noises, moving objects, or feelings of a presence, though the attributed source is different. An abandoned house might be considered haunted not by a human spirit, but by jinn who have taken up residence. Remember the ancient Ram Inn and its claims of incubi and succubi? Similar demonic or troublesome entities appear in various cultural mythologies under different names but with strikingly similar behaviors. Latin American cultures, with their blend of indigenous beliefs, European Catholicism, and African spiritual traditions, particularly in the Caribbean and Brazil, have a rich tapestry of ghost lore. La Llorona, the Weeping Woman, is a famous legend throughout Mexico and the southwestern United States, a spectral mother who drowned her children and now wanders waterways crying for them. While not strictly a house haunting, her story embodies the theme of a tragic, restless spirit. In places like Brazil, traditions like Candomblé and Umbanda involve communication with a pantheon of spirits, orishas, and spirits of the dead called eguns, and specific rituals are performed to honor them and seek their help or appease them if they are causing disturbances. Historians still argue whether the similarities in ghost archetypes across vastly different cultures, e.g., the woman in white, the tormented child, are due to universal psychological factors, cultural diffusion, or perhaps even some underlying objective reality to these experiences. Even within Europe, there's great diversity. Scandinavian folklore, for example, is rich with tales of draugr, formidable undead creatures, more akin to corporeal revenants than ethereal ghosts, who guard their burial mounds and can bring misfortune to the living. These are not your subtle, chain-rattling phantoms. They are often described as physically powerful and malevolent. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the Icelandic belief in huldufolk or hidden people, Elves who live in a parallel world but can interact with humans and whose dwellings, often rocks or hills, must not be disturbed, lest misfortune follow. While not ghosts, this belief reflects a broader cultural sensitivity to unseen presences in the landscape and the importance of respecting their spaces, much like one might respect a haunted house. What becomes clear is that while the specifics vary wildly, the underlying human need to make sense of death, to remember the departed, and to navigate the unsettling feeling of an unseen presence in one's environment is universal. Whether it's leaving out food for ancestors, performing an exorcism, or simply telling stories around a fire, cultures around the world have developed complex and fascinating ways to understand and interact with the spirits they believe share their world, and sometimes their homes. It's a global chorus of whispers, each culture adding its unique voice to the enduring mystery of what happens when the lights go out. Having explored the diverse ways cultures around the world perceive spirits, it's impossible to ignore the immense influence that fictional portrayals have on our collective understanding and fear of haunted houses. You see how scary stories in books and films shape our fears, providing a shared lexicon of terror, a set of tropes and expectations that color how we interpret any creak in the floorboards or shadow in a hall. Long before paranormal investigators roamed darkened corridors with EMF meters, storytellers were crafting narratives of spectral encounters that burrowed deep into the popular psyche. Gothic literature, which flourished in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, truly cemented the haunted house as a central figure in horror. Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, 1764, is often considered the first Gothic novel, and it's packed with gloomy castles, ancestral curses, and supernatural intrusions. And Radcliffe perfected the explained supernatural, where seemingly ghostly events are eventually given rational explanations, but not before terrifying her heroines and readers with suggestive horror. Think of Emily St. Aubert in The Mysteries of Udolpho, wandering the shadowy, labyrinthine castle, her imagination running wild. Even if the ghost turns out to be smugglers, the fear felt along the way is very real. It's like your brain enjoys the spooky roller coaster, even if it knows the monster at the end is just a guy in a rubber suit. Then came Edgar Allan Poe, master of psychological horror, whose tales like The Fall of the House of Usher didn't just feature a haunted house, but a house that was itself a malevolent, decaying entity, intrinsically linked to the decline of its inhabitants. The house is a character, reflecting and amplifying the madness within. You can almost feel the oppressive atmosphere Poe conjures, the sense of inevitable doom clinging to the very stones. This idea of the house as an active participant in a haunting, not just a passive container for spirits, became a powerful trope. The Victorian era, with its spiritualist fervor and fascination with death, Remember the Fox sisters and the rapping, saw a golden age of ghost stories. Writers like Sheridan Le Fanu with Green Tea or Carmilla, which, while a vampire story, has a deeply unsettling atmospheric quality, and Mar James, master of the antiquarian ghost story, where scholarly curiosity often unleashes ancient evils, refine the art of the chilling tale. Henry James's The Turn of the Screw is a masterpiece of ambiguity, leaving you, the reader, to endlessly debate whether the governess is genuinely seeing ghosts or descending into madness. That psychological uncertainty is often far more terrifying than a clear-cut monster. Is it the house that's haunted or the mind? Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, 1959, is a landmark in haunted house literature. Jackson masterfully uses psychological horror, focusing on the vulnerable Eleanor Vance and how the malevolent house seems to prey on her specific insecurities. The famous opening line, "No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream." Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. Sets the tone perfectly. The house itself is insane, and it seeks to draw others into its madness. This novel heavily influenced subsequent generations of horror writers and filmmakers. The mainstream historical fact is that Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House is widely regarded by critics as one of the finest horror novels of the 20th century, praised for its subtle psychological terror and its exploration of character under duress. Film, of course, took these literary traditions and amplified them visually and sonically. Early cinema dabbled in ghostly themes, but films like The Uninvited, 1944, truly brought the classic haunted house story to the screen with chilling effectiveness, complete with cold spots, spectral sobbing, and a tragic backstory. Later, Robert Wise's 1963 adaptation of The Haunting, based on Jackson's novel, became a benchmark for psychological horror in film, relying on suggestion, sound design, and unnerving camera angles rather than explicit gore. You feel the terror through the characters' experiences, the house itself becoming a disorienting, malevolent presence. It's like the cinematic equivalent of that creeping dread you feel when you know you're being watched. Then came films like The Exorcist, 1973, which, while not strictly a haunted house movie, brought demonic possession into the domestic sphere with shocking explicitness. And of course, the Amityville Horror, 1979, which, as we discussed, translated the alleged real-life haunting into a hugely successful, if controversial, horror film, solidifying many tropes. The family moving into their dream home, the escalating paranormal attacks, the priest's failed intervention. Remember those distinctive quarter-round windows? They became an instant icon of cinematic horror, a found-footage genre popularized by the Blair Witch Project, 1999, and later applied to haunted houses in films like Paranormal Activity, 2007, brought a new level of perceived realism and immediacy to the screen. You, the viewer, are seemingly watching raw, unedited footage of terrifying events, making the experience more visceral and unsettling. It's like you're there with the characters, experiencing their dawning horror in real time. One quirky or fringe tidbit is how the Paranormal Activity franchise, made on a shoestring budget, became a massive box office success, demonstrating audiences' hunger for simple, suggestive scares over expensive special effects, proving that what you don't see is often scarier. These fictional portrayals don't just entertain us. They actively shape our expectations of what a haunting should be. The creaking door, the cold spot, the child's ghostly laughter, the message written in blood or steam, these have become ingrained in our cultural consciousness largely through books and films. When someone experiences an unexplained event in their home, their mind often jumps to these familiar tropes. Historians still argue whether the increasing homogeneity of reported paranormal experiences in recent decades is due to a genuine underlying commonality in phenomena, or if it's more a reflection of a shared global culture saturated by these fictional narratives. Fiction provides a framework, a language, for understanding and expressing these deep-seated fears. It allows us to explore the what-ifs in a contained space. What if that noise wasn't the pipes? What if that shadow didn't move? These stories are a mirror, reflecting our anxieties about the unknown that lurks just beyond the veil, or perhaps just within the walls of our own homes, shaping our nightmares and our most thrilling, fearful daydreams. After traversing these shadowy landscapes of fact, folklore, and fiction, after considering the earnest searches for evidence and the rational explanations that seek to dispel the gloom, you arrive at a place of quiet contemplation. We acknowledge the profound mysteries that paranormal accounts still hold. Despite centuries of storytelling, decades of investigation, and the bright lights of scientific scrutiny, there remains a core of the unexplained, a persistent whisper of what if that keeps these tales alive and potent in our collective imagination. You find yourself sitting with the ambiguity, the tantalizing possibility that not every creak can be explained away. Not every shadow is a trick of the light. Even when we account for misinterpretations, environmental factors, psychological phenomena, and outright hoaxes, there are still cases, those stubborn outliers, that resist easy categorization. Think of the sheer number of witnesses to the Bell Witch phenomena, people outside the immediate family who reported intelligent, interactive communication with an unseen entity. Or consider the layers of tragedy and reported phenomena at a place like Monte Cristo Homestead, where the weight of history seems to palpably press upon visitors. While individual elements might be explained, cumulative effect, the sheer persistence of the narrative across generations, can be harder to dismiss entirely. The very nature of consciousness is one of the greatest mysteries we face. What is it? Where does it reside? And crucially for our topic, what happens to it after physical death? Mainstream science has yet to provide a definitive, universally accepted answer that satisfies everyone. This fundamental unknown is the fertile ground in which belief in ghosts and hauntings takes root. If we don't fully understand consciousness in life, how can we be absolutely certain about its fate after death? It's this gap in our knowledge that allows the what if to flourish. You can almost feel that question hanging in the air, a silent counterpoint to every skeptical argument. The subjective nature of paranormal experiences also makes them incredibly difficult to study scientifically in a repeatable, controlled manner. Most ghostly encounters are spontaneous, personal, and often fleeting. The feeling of a presence, a sudden chill, a disembodied whisper, these are not easily replicated in a laboratory setting. The scientific method thrives on objective, measurable, and repeatable data. How do you measure a feeling of dread or verify a whispered name heard only by one person in a room? This methodological challenge means that personal testimony, while often compelling, frequently falls short of the rigorous standards of scientific proof. It's like trying to catch smoke with a sieve, yet the sheer volume and consistency of certain reported phenomena across cultures and time periods, as we touched upon with global ghost traditions, are intriguing. The woman in white, the spectral child, the feeling of being watched, the unexplained cold spot, these archetypes recur with remarkable similarity. Are these simply common human psychological responses to certain environments or anxieties, as some sociologists and psychologists suggest? Or could they point to something more? The mainstream historical fact is that cross-cultural analysis of folklore reveals recurring motifs and archetypal figures in ghost stories worldwide, suggesting either shared psychological roots or widespread cultural diffusion of these narratives. Consider the concept of place memory or residual haunting, the idea that strong emotions or traumatic events can somehow be imprinted onto a location, replaying themselves like a psychic recording. The horrors of the LaLaurie Mansion or the Villisca Axe murder house, for example, are so profound that it's easy to imagine them leaving some kind of energetic stain. While the mechanism for such an imprint is unknown to current science, the anecdotal evidence from people who feel an overwhelming sense of sadness, fear, or even replays of events in such locations is persistent. Historians still argue whether the concept of place memory has any objective validity or is purely a psychological phenomenon where knowledge of a location's history primes individuals to experience certain emotions or interpret ambiguous stimuli in a specific way. The role of quantum physics is sometimes invoked in more speculative discussions about the paranormal, with theories about consciousness existing independently of the brain, or an interconnectedness that transcends our normal understanding of space and time. These are often highly theoretical and not widely accepted within the mainstream scientific community as explanations for ghosts, but they illustrate the ongoing human attempt to find a framework, however unconventional, for experiences that don't fit neatly into our current models of reality. It's the frontier where science fiction and speculative science sometimes blur with paranormal belief. Perhaps the ghosts are just entangled particles with unresolved emotional baggage. We also have to acknowledge the limitations of our own perception. Our senses are finite. We perceive only a small fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, a narrow range of sound frequencies. Who is to say with absolute certainty what might exist beyond the current capabilities of our senses or our scientific instruments? This isn't an argument for ghosts, but rather an acknowledgement of humility in the face of the vastness of the unknown. Remember the Death Watch beetle, tapping away, once thought to be a supernatural omen? What other subtle phenomena might we be misinterpreting or failing to detect altogether? Ultimately, the enduring mystery of haunted houses and ghostly encounters lies in their ability to challenge our understanding of reality, of life and death, and of our place in the universe. They remind us that there may be more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies, to paraphrase Hamlet. Whether these mysteries will one day be fully explained by science, or whether they will always remain in the realm of speculation and belief, is itself an unanswered question. And it is in that space of not knowing, that persistent, tantalizing ambiguity, that the true chill and fascination of these stories reside. You are left, not necessarily with answers, but with a deeper appreciation for the questions themselves. As our journey through these true disturbing haunted house scary stories begins to draw towards its quiet close, you might find yourself in a slightly altered state. The shadows in your own room might seem a little deeper, the familiar sounds of your home imbued with a new layer of potential meaning. You might listen a little differently to your own house settling tonight. That sudden creak from the hallway, the soft groan of the floorboards upstairs, are they merely the house breathing, or could they be something more? The stories we've explored, from Amityville's demonic claims to the sorrowful echoes in Monte Cristo, have a way of seeping into your consciousness, subtly shifting your perception of the everyday. It's a natural human response. We've spent this time together immersed in tales of the uncanny, the unsettling, the unexplained. We've walked through spectral corridors, listened for disembodied whispers, and contemplated the possibility of presences that linger just beyond our senses. Your mind, now primed by these narratives, might be more attuned to the subtle nuances of your environment, more inclined to question the source of that unexpected chill or that fleeting movement glimpsed in your peripheral vision. Remember that discussion about the power of suggestion? It's not just a factor in formal investigations, it's at play right now as these stories settle in your mind. Think back to the very beginning when we talked about those innocuous house sounds, the ticks, the creaks. Before our journey, you might have dismissed them without a second thought. Now, perhaps, there's a flicker of hesitation, a moment of consideration. Is that just the old pipes, as you've always assumed? Or could it be something akin to the tapping of the Death Watch beetle, a sound once interpreted with such ominous significance? Or more unnervingly, could it echo the initial subtle disturbances reported at the Bell farm, before Kate made her vocal and violent presence known? It's not about becoming paranoid, but about acknowledging how these stories can awaken a dormant sensitivity, a heightened awareness. You might find yourself noticing things you previously ignored. The way a door seems to drift open slightly, even when you're sure there's no draft. The way the temperature in one particular corner of a room always seems a bit cooler. The faint, unidentifiable scent that wafts through the air for a moment and then vanishes. These are the small anomalies that, in the context of the tales we've shared, can take on a new, more mysterious significance. It's like your home, a place of ultimate familiarity, suddenly holds a few more secrets, a few more unanswered questions. You might even find yourself doing your own little paranormal investigation, straining your ears in the quiet, watching the shadows with a more focused gaze. Was that the cat or spectral feline from the great beyond demanding a ghostly saucer of milk? The mainstream historical fact is that storytelling has always been a primary way humans make sense of the world and transmit cultural knowledge, including warnings about potential dangers, both real and perceived. These haunted house stories, in a way, are modern-day cautionary tales, reminding us of the fragility of our sense of security, the mysteries of death, and the lingering power of the past. They equip us with a kind underscore heightened alertness, even if it's largely symbolic. Consider the Winchester Mystery House, that sprawling labyrinth built to confuse spirits. While your own home is unlikely to feature staircases to nowhere or doors opening onto blank walls, The idea of a house having hidden spaces, of its architecture holding secrets, might resonate differently now. You might look at that old sealed-off fireplace or that curiously placed access panel in the ceiling with a newfound curiosity. What forgotten histories might your own dwelling hold? What stories are embedded in its very foundations? Even the rational explanations we explored, the infrasound, the carbon monoxide, the old house settling, can take on a slightly different hue. Knowing these things doesn't entirely banish the unease that a good ghost story can create. Instead, it adds another layer to your perception. You become more aware of the subtle environmental factors that can affect your senses and your mood. That feeling of being watched, is it a lingering spirit or the subtle effects of low-frequency sound from the traffic outside? The mystery shifts, perhaps, but doesn't entirely disappear. Historians still argue whether the human predisposition to anthropomorphize, to attribute human-like agency to inanimate objects or unseen forces, is an evolutionary adaptation or a byproduct of our complex social brains. This tendency is certainly at play when we start to interpret our house's creaks as intentional whispers. One quirky or fringe tidbit to consider is the stone tape theory, a speculative idea popular in paranormal circles, though without scientific backing, that suggests that emotional or traumatic events can be recorded onto the physical environment, particularly stone or water, and then replayed under certain conditions perceived by sensitive individuals. Whether or not there's any truth to it, the idea that your home's very walls could hold an imprint of past joys, sorrows, or even traumas is a compelling one. It makes the house itself a silent witness, a repository of unseen history. So as you lie there, listening to the night murmurs of your own home, don't be surprised if you feel a little more attentive. It's not about succumbing to fear, but about engaging with a sense of wonder, a sense of mystery. The stories we've shared are meant to be unsettling, to provoke thought, to make you question. And if they make you listen just a little more closely to the secret language of your own home, then they've done their job. Perhaps you'll even leave a light on in the hallway tonight, just in case. Not because you're scared, of course, just for, ambience. And so, as the deepest part of the night begins to yield, ever so slightly, to the first faint hints of dawn, our journey through these true, disturbing, haunted house scary stories draws to its inevitable close. The echoes of spectral whispers and chilling encounters begin to soften, to recede like a tide. We prepare to let these unsettling stories gently fade into dream, carrying with them the residue of fear, fascination, and profound mysteries we've explored together. You feel the weight of these tales, the shivers they induced, but also, perhaps, a strange sense of connection to the long human tradition of grappling with the unknown. The shadows in your room, which may have seemed so deep and pregnant with possibility just a short while ago, now begin to resolve themselves back into familiar shapes. The wardrobe is just a wardrobe, the curtain just a curtain. The house around you continues its subtle symphony of clicks and sighs, but perhaps they sound a little less like coded messages from the beyond and more like the natural respiration of the structure settling into the rhythm of the coming day. That rational part of your brain, the one that insists on logical explanations, begins to reassert itself, gently nudging aside the more imaginative interpretations that the night encouraged. Remember the comfort of mundane explanations? They feel a little more welcome now, don't they? The unsettling residents of Amityville, the tragic nun of Borley, the tormented spirits of a LaLaurie mansion, the vocal bell witch, Sarah Winchester's labyrinthine obsession, the sorrowful echoes of Monte Cristo, the ancient energies of the Ram Inn, the child spirit of the Sally House, Loftus Hall's demonic guest, the unresolved horror of Villisca, and the phantoms of Edinburgh's vaults. These figures and their chilling abodes have been our companions through the darkness. They represent a spectrum of human fear and fascination, from the brutal realities of crime and cruelty to the more ethereal whispers of lingering sorrow and unfinished business. Each story, in its own way, has poked at that primal part of us that wonders about what lies just beyond our understanding. But now it's time to gently shepherd these spectral guests out of your immediate thoughts. Allow the adrenaline to subside, the heightened senses to relax. The purpose of these journeys is not to leave you in a state of perpetual fear, but to engage with these narratives, to explore their power, and then to return to your own space with a renewed appreciation for its peace, its familiarity. You've peered into the abyss, so to speak, and now you can step back, perhaps with a little more insight, a little more empathy for those who claim such experiences, and a healthy respect for the power of a well-told story. The mainstream historical fact to hold on to as we wind down is that human beings are incredibly resilient. We have an innate capacity to process fear, to find comfort, and to reestablish a sense of normalcy even after confronting unsettling ideas. The tales we've shared are potent, but they are, in the end, stories, narratives woven from history, folklore, belief, and sometimes misinterpretation or deception. Their power lies in their ability to tap into universal human concerns, but they do not have to dictate your reality. As the first light begins to paint the edges of your window, let it bring a sense of calm, of closure. The world outside is stirring, the ordinary rhythms of life resuming. The ghosts of the night, whether you believe them to be real entities or potent metaphors, tend to recede with the dawn. There's a reason why most ghost stories are set in the darkness. Light has a way of dispelling shadows, both literal and metaphorical. Historians still argue, and perhaps always will, about the true nature of the experiences that give rise to ghost stories. But for now, that debate can rest. One final, quirky tidbit to carry with you into the quietude. In some cultures, it's believed that rooster crows at dawn actively drive away malevolent spirits and negative energies, heralding the return of safety and light. Whether or not you have a rooster handy, you can embrace that symbolism. The night's journey is over. The unsettling presences have had their say. Now it's time for quiet. Let the cadence of my voice, which has guided you through these shadowed places, now become a soothing murmur. Allow your breathing to deepen, your muscles to relax. The fan's hum, which earlier might have seemed to carry whispers, now becomes a gentle white noise, a lullaby to ease you into stillness. The tales are told. The shivers have passed. You are safe in your own space as the night yields to a new day. The house around you is just a house, your sanctuary. After section 15, add the 300-word wind down. This instruction seems to be misplaced in the prompt. The outline was for 22 bullets, and this instruction states, after section 15, add the 300-word wind down, see below, and finish with end of script. Sweet dreams. However, the prompt also said deliver in 15 numbered sections, and then after section 15, add the 300-word wind down. I have provided 22 sections based on the 22 bullets and placed the wind down here after section 22, as per the bullet plan and the final instruction to finish with end of script. Sweet dreams. After the wind down, the last echoes of those unsettling tales are now fading, like mist in the morning sun. The journey through darkened hallways and past sorrowful histories has reached its gentle end. Allow your mind to soften, to let go of the vivid images, the chilling possibilities. Feel the comfortable weight of your blankets, the familiar presence of your room. The night has shared its secrets, its shivers, and now it offers a different gift, the promise of rest, of quietude. Let the unsettling thoughts drift away, replaced by a sense of calm, a quiet stillness. The world outside is beginning to stir, but here, in this space, there is only peace. The shadows are retreating, and the ordinary, comforting reality of your surroundings reasserts itself. Every story has its ending, and this exploration of the spectral and the eerie is now drawing to its peaceful close. Breathe deeply, easily. Let the gentle rhythm of your breath guide you toward a state of profound relaxation. The journey was through the night, but it leads you now to the soft embrace of oncoming sleep or the quiet contemplation of early morning. The whispers are hushed. The unease is smoothed away. All is well.